made to the life of this city and this region. And then I invite you to bow your head in prayer. Lord, we ask for your blessing upon our city, our community, and our council. Guide us in our decision-making to act fairly, without fear or favour, and with compassion, integrity, and honesty. May we show true leadership, be inclusive of all, and guide the City of Wanneroo to a prosperous future that all may share. We ask this in your name. Amen. Mrs. Smart, could I please ask you to make the announcements?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Please note that the audio proceedings of tonight's meeting will be live broadcast online, with the exception of matters discussed behind closed doors. That broadcast will remain available via the City of Wanneroo website following the conclusion of this meeting. In regards to the COVID-19 pandemic situation, the City of Wanneroo is committed to ensuring the safety of all attendees at their public meetings. In accordance with the West Australian State Government Health Directives, social distancing has been applied to this meeting room, and the capacity of the chamber is limited under these conditions. Mayor, I will advise that we have reached capacity, and should we have more people attending, they will be redirected to our overflow area in the Banksia rooms. In addition, masks are required to be worn at all public indoor settings, and therefore all attendees at this meeting are please requested to wear a mask at all times, even whilst talking, unless a medical exemption has been provided. Thank you for your understanding of these conditions, and thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mrs. Smart. Moving through to the agenda, item 1, attendances as per the record. Item 2, apologies and leave of absence. We have an apology from Councillor Natalie Herridge, who is isolating at home because she is a close contact. And I can certainly relate to that, because that's exactly what happened to me last week, and that's the reason I wasn't at the briefing session. We also have an apology from Councillor Vin Nguyen. We have 2 requests for leave of absence. The first request is from Councillor Chris Baker, with a leave of absence for the period of 11th of July to the 31st of August 2022 inclusive. And the second leave of absence is from myself, and I write to the CEO, and this has been provided to the CEO, that I write in reference to your letter dated the 24th of August 2021 and the Council Members' election campaign protocol document that we co-signed on the 8th of September 2021. The Prime Minister has now called the federal election for Saturday the 21st of May 2022, and I hereby request Council to grant me a leave of absence effective Wednesday the 13th of April to Saturday the 21st of May 2022. I request that the payment of my allowance be suspended during the leave of absence, and I will also return my council-provided vehicle and laptop for the duration of this period. And the reason is that this has been asked for at the council meeting this evening is because Sunday was when the Prime Minister advised of the election, and the item 9 of the undertaking, it requests Council to grant me a leave of absence from the City of Wanneroo Council for the campaign period commencing from the date of the issue of the writs for the election. And of course, this is my first opportunity to ask the Council, hence the reason it is recorded in today's meeting. And I don't believe we have any other leave of absences. No. Can I please have a mover and seconder for the apologies and leave of absence? Thank you, Councillor Treby, and thank you, Councillor Rowe. Thank you. Okay, so are there any objections? There are no objections. Thank you. Item 3, public question and statement time. So do we have the register, Mr. CEO? Yeah. So we have a running sheet now while Mrs. Smart is bringing up the other register. So we do have a running sheet, and I'll ask Mrs. Smart to resume her seat and ask for the general rules that apply to question time and statement time. Thank you, Mrs. Smart.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The following general rules apply to public question and statement time. Public questions and statements should only relate to the business of the local government and should not be a personal statement or opinion. Only questions relating to matters affecting the local government will be considered at a council meeting. Questions may be taken on notice and responded to after the meeting. Questions may not be directed at specific council members or city employees, and questions are requested to be framed in such a way as to not reflect adversely on a particular council member or city employee. First priority is given to persons who are asking questions relating to items on the current council meeting agenda, and second priority is given to public statements. Only public statements regarding items on the council agenda under consideration will be heard. Each person seeking to ask questions or to make a statement may collectively address the council for a maximum of 3 minutes each. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mrs. Smart. And our first question is Ms. Michael from Two Rocks. If I could please ask you to make your way to the podium and clearly state your name and address for our records. Thank you. It's one of the worst things when you come from the back of the room. Hi.
I'm Helen Mark, but I have the question here. Am I allowed to read a statement?
Right, absolutely. Yes, you may.
Okay. My question was kind of answered from Dot Newton on this sheet that I picked up at the front, the one that I put online. But my question to the councillors is, can you decide tonight to amend the structure plan to ensure the developer, Finney, adheres to the original idea for Two Rocks Town Centre, that of a tourist/boutique shopping/entertainment destination, and not just a mishmash of the big grey buildings and major commercial conglomerates like Woolworths? It is diabolical to think that the councillors who are representing the people have not thought about this before now. Thanks to councillors Newen and, I'm sorry, Frank, I've forgotten. Frank.
I have told myself.
Councillor Civic.
And subsequently Councillor Baker for at least questioning the validity and suitability of a big grey box on our iconic marina under the nose of our iconic King Neptune. Two Rocks could be a world-renowned, distinct place for not just developers' dream, but one which has happened all up and down our coast. Please investigate why this area has not been heritage listed in 20 years sitting on someone's desk.
Thank you, Ms. Michael, and I can certainly answer that question. The recommendation is on the agenda this evening, and we also do have an amendment which Council will consider. Thank you. And next question, Mrs. Dot Newton.
Good evening, Lady Mayor, elected members, directors and staff. Mrs. Dot Newton, 11 Huntsville Court, Wanneroo. As you know, it's all been published on Facebook, so why not say it? I seek your indulgence tonight to make a statement and ask questions. My first question relates to CSO2, and the comments at the briefing prompted a two-part question. If council's ratepayers paid more than $500,000 for last year's election, why would council raise holding another later this year? If or when the mayor is successful in the federal election, this amount would be unfunded, and in 2023 another election will be held. That's a question. Anybody going to answer it?
Okay, Mr. CEO.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Mrs. Newton, for the question. Unfortunately, under the Act, the Local Government Act, there is no option but for council to proceed with calling an election if there is a requirement to have an extraordinary election, and then subsequently an ordinary election after that.
The second part of that is it possible for council to approach the minister to delay holding this one based on the cost to the ratepayer and less than half the term remaining once it took place.
Thank you, Mrs. Newton. There is always an opportunity for this council to move a motion on notice to that effect for the Minister.
Thank you. Does council, and this has been mentioned, does council have a protocol involving elected members taking leave of absence when standing either state or federal parliament? Some councillors have in the past stood several times without seeking leave, while others have. Is there one, and does it include the suspension of allowance? And you've already announced that yours will be suspended, Madam Mayor, so nobody else has lodged one tonight, so I will take that as answered. I would like to make a short statement, and I'm sorry, it is a bit of a personal opinion. I believe that our council and the others are not being adequately represented by WELGA. When they deal with the state, I have read the minutes, read the media releases. The current president has 392 electors and a revenue of 4.7 million. The deputy president has 7,600 electors and a revenue of 20 million. I believe that they have demonstrated that they failed to identify or support growth councils. Perhaps a motion of no confidence from the North Metro State Council should be considered. The application on Two Rocks item going to JDAC lacks the tourism vision council has had for the area or the expectation of the residents who have chosen to live there. The heritage report is shameful, and when I read it, it reminded me of the one produced when they refused to protect St Anthony's Church here in Wanneroo. I will submit my thoughts on the draft economic strategy and urge others to do the same. I do hope Council fully supports the sponsorship of constable care. It's in the news at the moment. Young people face many more challenges these days when it comes to bullying, both off and online. Stranger danger occurs online with predators. It also assists them in seeing the police as someone to trust and turn to if necessary. I'm sorry, Madam Mayor, I have to leave straight after this, but I will listen when I get home. I'm not feeling 100%. It's not COVID related. Before I go, I'd like to wish you all a safe and happy Easter. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Newton. The next question, statement from Ms. A. Benkendorf.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor and Councillors. Tonight we would ask Councillors to keep the following things in mind when voting on Councillor Baker's motion on the Two Rocks Woolworths development. Two Rocks residents as a whole are not opposed to development or the introduction of a Woolworths into the town. We understand that our little coastal town is growing. The objection is based on the specific location of that development. The site of the proposed Woolworths pardon me, is the statement site of the town centre of Two Rocks. It will set the tone for all future developments in that marina zone area. The state government has committed millions to the marina to transform it into a world-class destination, and the best the Finney Group can think of is to stick a Woolworths on that statement site. Under the district structure plan, the district centre of Two Rocks is identified as performing a different function than all other district centres. It is to be based on a tourism and resort economy. The proposed development does not promote or encourage a tourism economy. In fact, you can find a similar Woolworths shopping centre in most average suburbs in the metro area. If anything, the proposed development only detracts from the tourism value of the area by restricting views and access from and to the iconic King Neptune statue. This is the site that determines whether Two Rocks is a tourist destination or just another suburb in the northern sprawl. The proposed development is located directly in front of the iconic King Neptune statue and on the former site of Atlantis Marine Park. These places have a special place in West Australians' hearts, not just Two Rocks residents. We have heard a lot about the purported little significance value of the proposed site in previous discussions. However, as already noted by councillors, this is not reflected by the immense public opposition to the location of the proposed development. Heritage Minister David Templeman recently acknowledged that King Neptune is special and said that the King Neptune statue is an iconic Perth landmark and is much loved by West Australia community. It really captured the essence of Perth and West Australia in the 1980s. I remember visiting Atlantis Marine Park in the 80s, and it was like nothing else I'd ever seen. And I think that there are many West Australians who look back on their time at Atlantis fondly. It is part of the West Australia story, and I am glad that the community is actively recognising that fact and getting behind its preservation. It is important to get the development of this area right. It cannot be undone. We understand that this development ticks some boxes, but it also misses the mark considerably. It's about balancing a balance of those priorities. As councillors, we ask you to represent the views of your constituents and place the value of heritage and the sustainable development of this unique area above a developer's need for an easy cash grab. Accordingly, we ask that you cast your votes in favour of the motion put forward by Councillor Baker this evening and recommend that the development application by Woolworths be refused.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms Beggendorf. Our next question statement is Ms Mitef. If I could kindly ask you to please state your name and address for our records. Thank you.
My name is Marshall Mitef. My address is 128 Casilda Way, Two Rocks. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today, Lady Mayor. I oppose the proposed shop, liquor store, restaurant and office at 10 Enterprise Avenue, Two Rocks. My statement is in regards to the issues of poor visual connections and not a main street approach in this development. With the already unique marine, unique history and beachside town. The integrity of the developer is questionable, with like statements from the Two Rocks Town Centre Structure Plan 2014, page 49. It states that issues of poor visual connection with the existing buildings, which make their long-term commercial and social viability questionable, we may seek to demolish. People believe, this little community, that their town is protected with confidence that King Neptune and all its stories are safe. We know today that is not true. The land has been tied up for years. Local have cared for the king. There has been revisions after revisions and changes of decision makers. As a new homeowner, neighbour, community and a WA resident, I'm strongly requesting that the development is refused. That's my statement. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms Mitef. And next speaker, questions and statement, Mr A. Shackleton. I almost feel like we should have some pipe music or something when people at the back coming down. It's like that really quiet walk.
Mayor, Deputy Mayor, Councillors. My name's Alan Shuttleton and I live at 23 Spring Hill Place, Two Rocks, in case anybody wants to drop a carton around. Since this campaign started, we've been advised to stick to planning criteria. What people's views are don't come into question, into the equation. The developer has his plan submitted to those planning rules, and those planning rules will only be taken into consideration under planning guidelines. If the residents of Turox have no bearing on the decisions made in their district, where does that leave us? In spite of what the developer has said, proper consultation has never been undertaken and presented to the people of Turox as previously stated by the developers. My wife and I have resided in Turox now for nearly 30 years, and as long as I can remember, it's always been expected that Atlantis would always have a tourist atmosphere. You can have all the private consultants you want, engaged by the developers and textbook ideas of what they envisage a plan should be. But it comes nowhere near what this suburb means to the people that actually live here, and the potential that this precinct could do, not only for Turox, but for the broader future, for the state, and for the tourism and heritage. You only have to live here to witness the amount of visitors from all over who come to view the ocean and the surroundings, looking over the top of Woolworths, the surroundings. Looking over the top of Woolworths, a roof and service station and a fast food outlet is not the best impression for the area. If there's been no talk of a service station, I can assure you that that's his next move. It appears to me that the Subiaco quartet, as I call them, are up to no good in some respects, and they're not being honest with people. The plan from Blueprint, which showing this public open space to fool everybody, is not what is going to happen, and that is not what is happening now. The little bit of land that we're given, it's supposed to be government owned or whatever it is, to the north of King Neptune is a pittance to what they've promised that they were going to do in this area. So this blueprint is misleading. Whether it's deliberately misleading or not, I can't say, but it's certainly misleading. We welcome all these facilities to the area. I would love to see Bunnings up here too. I love to go to Bunnings, but not on the Atlantis site. My wife doesn't though, because I spend all the pension. But, you know, there's a place further north where I believe the new town site's going to be, and these are the places, I think, where the service stations and that should be. When I have a look down the coast, I look at Hillary's as the only place that caters on a large scale for tourism and family activities. Looking at the future plans for the marina in general by the government, this urban plan for Atlantis precinct is way out of sync, because we're having a tourist sort of precinct on the waterfront, but we're having a Coles, a service station, a Woolworths and God knows units and back-to-back housing, which I'll come to in a minute. Because looking at the, if we stop thinking, where am I? Hillary's is a little, looking at the future plans for the marina in general, the government, as I said, it's way out of sync. If we stop thinking with our hearts and forget the passionate feelings of the people in general when making big decisions about the way we live our lives, then what sort of future do we have to look forward to? And what sort of legacy do we pass on to our children? I'll conclude with these points. 1, the history and heritage and stories of Turox are still being told by residents and visitors and need to be preserved and respected. And not only that, I live right opposite this and we see how many people come up to that King Neptune every day, and they're quite a lot of people. The last thing they want to be doing is looking over a Woolworths. 2, the commercial retail area should be kept as shops that attract tourists. And a good example of this is Margaret River, and facilities such as public open space and family activities, because everybody that we speak to in Turox, this is what they want. Also, traffic provision are unrealistic considering the future roundabout at Charnwood. We've got a bus stop, whoever's responsible for the bus stops along Turox Road, where no buses can pull in off the road. A cycleway right at the end of a dangerous S-bend, which we've seen 2 accidents in the last month. One bloke got cleaned up on the cycleway because a vehicle was speeding around the S-bend. Councillor Sangali at the briefing meeting mentioned that there was a petition for 1,200 people to council, which obviously there was. Well, you can double that 2,500 because another petition was got up not long after that, and it was presented to Parliament by John Quigley. And so you're looking at probably, when you look at the total population of Turox, 2,500 people are not bad.
Thank you, Mr Shuttleton. Our next speaker, public question time or statement, is Ms Zed Benkendorf.
Hi, my name is Zakaya. I'm a resident of Two Rocks and I have been since birth. I love the town of Two Rocks and the general town feeling. Two Rocks is a very unique place. Very few places in the metro area still have that feeling of town connection and togetherness. I strongly believe this proposed development will taint this feeling of belonging and destroy this small fishing town's general aesthetic. As a young person, I'm very mindful and careful about how my actions affect the environment. If this Woolworths was to go on the proposed site, the environmental effects on the ocean and land would be catastrophic, not to mention the number of animals that have already been misplaced or even slaughtered during the mindless flattening of the area. Think about the amount of rubbish and physical pollution that is found around Yanchep Shopping Complex. The same amount of rubbish, if not more, would be blown directly into the ocean, marina and neighbouring parks, killing sea, beach and wildlife. King Neptune and the old Atlantis Marine Park has been a huge part of my childhood. My family and I used to walk through the ruins and look at the pools, slides and amphitheatres that were still there. It was a magical place and we need to preserve that feeling of magic. Residents of Two Rocks and many people around Western Australia have grown up knowing of the wonder that was Atlantis Marine Park. Putting a huge monstrosity on that site would just not do it any justice. The place was home to dolphins that jumped through hoops and seals that could jump and could juggle a ball on their nose. People seriously are even contemplating putting a huge grey building there. People keep telling me that this is the future and that the younger generations want this development. I am the younger generation, and all of my friends agree that putting a Woolworths on that site would be a travesty. I am the future, and I don't want a Woolworths on the Atlantis Marine Park site. Thank you.
Well done. Thank you, Ms Benkendorf. Thank you. Our next speaker, Mr B Nicol. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Deputy Mayor, councillors and council people. The proposed amendment to recommendation item 4.4, Amendment 2. I support this amendment recommendation for JDAP to refuse the proposal plus the following observations. The Yanchep Two Rocks District Structural Plan, 7.1 Guiding Principles from the City of Wanneroo's Smart Growth Strategy Policies includes to facilitate the creation of healthy communities in terms of healthy lifestyles, social cohesion and economic prosperity. 3, economical integrity of the region and local significant sites. 4, to respond and integrate key landscape features and foreshore characteristics. I submit that a supermarket and other possible attached enterprises do not create a healthy community lifestyle or social cohesion, as the extent of public objections indicates. Maintaining ecological integrity and significant sites have already been significantly obliterated by the recent levelling of the sites surrounding the surrounding topography, which this developer continues to do despite no decision on the Woolworths proposal. Even more damning is the responsibility to integrate key landscape features, topography of the existing sand dunes and foreshore characteristics, which has been largely ignored and seems irrelevant to the developer and the powers that be, who in our democratic society should and must take account and act on voiced community priorities. Also, at last week's deputation meeting, there was some suggestion of pursuing the heritage of the whole of the Atlantis precinct, which I can only applaud. I strongly feel that, as others do, that the historic link to the Atlantis Marine Park precinct is important to the community and should be taken into account in these deliberations. Lastly, even if there seems to be no legal requirement to do so. Lastly, while the intent of the Atlantis precinct should take advantage of this unique and historic landscape to develop the promise that it offers for the future viability of Two Rocks region as a tourist destination, which can only increase prospects for local employment through activation of new and innovative tourist-orientated businesses, outweighing any job opportunities offered by Woolworths, which may or may not necessarily be offered to locals, and in the long term these jobs will decline as automation and online shopping take hold. I have a plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Nicol. Ms A. Coleman, please. If I could kindly ask you to state your name and address for our records. Thank you.
Sorry.
If I could ask you to please state your name and address for our records. Thank you.
Can everyone hear? Oh, I didn't want to touch it. Thank you very much. Mayor and councillors, Deanna was 15 and Chris Senior was 17 when they met in the Anship National Park on an outing with the Irish Club 65 years ago. They raised 6 boys in North Beach. Their Easter holidays were spent camping in the campground at Club Capricorn. The family explored the bush, the coast and Atlantis Marine Park when it was built in 1981. Like many, they climbed King Neptune, and in their teen years the boys continued to drive up from North Beach to surf. My husband and I bought a block 30 years ago. 29 years ago, we were the first wedding in St James Church in Yanship. Since then, Atlantis is gone, the campground is gone, the church is gone. There has been unimaginable growth since my in-laws first met. However, one thing has remained constant. The statue of King Neptune since 1985 is like a beacon to those returning home, a place for walking and talking, looking out over Two Rocks, the marina, the sea, and a place for kids to have adventures. In 2016, Admin and Council made a decision on the use of the land surrounding King Neptune. In 2016, no one could have predicted COVID and the change in how we would live just 6 years later. In 2022, we are vaccinated, wear masks, socially distance, and isolate when a family member has COVID. We work from home, and we are more likely to take a holiday in our own state, if not in our own city. King Neptune has long been the draw card of Two Rocks, just like the giant ram in Wagen, the big snail in Bremer Bay, the big prawn in Exmouth, the big orange in Harvey, and the giant emu in Nannup. None of these are overshadowed or even within the same space as a shopping centre, but they are synonymous with their towns, just like King Neptune is for Two Rocks. He is a draw card to climb up the hill and take pictures, then upload to Instagram, where you will find literally thousands of images of King Neptune along with his view. This is an opportunity to change the current direction, not only of the space surrounding King Neptune, but the town of Two Rocks. An opportunity to readdress the needs of our town and enhance our tourism potential. The existing shopping centre with its Spanish-inspired wall overlooking the marina has been a draw card for many years, supported by the tavern, cafe and restaurants. Please take into consideration not only the heritage value of King Neptune, but also the space around him and how it can be utilised as a tourist attraction. Supported by a parade of boutique shops, consider a mixture of cafes, wine bar, ice cream parlour, and specialty shops that tourists could wander down. A minor square with a water feature similar to one at Elizabeth Quay where children could safely play. The current plan is to have the centre of Two Rocks set well back from this area, which would be a more appropriate place for Woolworths. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Coleman. Mr W. Schaefer.
Hi, Warren Schaefer. I live at 17B Spring Hill Place in Two Rocks. Good evening, council members, mayor. I refer to the Woolworths proposal for Two Rocks. Right, in my hand here, I have the latest City of Wanneroo calendar. In my opposite hand here, I have a Woolworths brochure, both delivered the same way via mail. However, both represent two avenues and appeasing to the eye. One will be placed on the wall and admired by visitors to your residence. The other will be thrown away if it makes it to the recycling bin by the end of the week. I would also like to point out that 5 of your photos in the calendar have been used. That are taken to Two Rocks precinct, which would further cement the fact that Two Rocks has a strong tourism value. And the mere fact that you're allowing one of the major tourist attractions to be decimated by a large concrete block astounds me. You don't go to the Eiffel Tower to have a look at the McDonald's or a large supermarket chain. What are the Wanneroo photographers going to take next year? Pictures of air conditioners? I mean, surely those pictures can be obtained from any air conditioning expert or you're in a brochure. As I sat here the other night listening to Woolworths and Philip Griffiths deliver their speeches for the proposal to go ahead of their keynotes, you guys have been vastly misrepresented and overlooked, and many things have been misaddressed. And I'd like to take my analogy to this proposal of the level of cars, something that I know about, and that I'm sure that people... What the Woolworths proposal is that of a great wall. Economical, functional, and has won multiple awards by the car manufacturer themselves. But you would hardly put a picture of a great wall on your wall. On the other side, you have a Lamborghini Countach, built in the 80s, but won 0 awards and holds very little function. I know this is not the greatest analogy. But the product itself sold itself due to its uniqueness and will probably be hung on the wall for teenagers to admire over time. Not to mention the vehicle itself will appreciate over time due to its uniqueness. Some would say this car is a boutique, finer grain sports car. The Great Wall, however, will depreciate over time. Its awards will be lost and diminished, along with the rest of it, and will end up at the wrecking yard if it's lucky. You don't go to a museum to see a Great Wall. You don't go and hide a Lamborghini behind a Great Wall. And as much as you can put a spoiler on it, paint it or badge it as a Lamborghini, at the end of the day, it is a poorly manufactured, run-of-the-mill, prefabricated, reasonably priced car. Councillors, you are getting sold a cheap car badge propped up by its own made awards, i.e. the architect himself, which, I shouldn't say this, but my children get participation awards all the time. Doesn't mean that they are good at the subject matter. I would also like to note the heritage significance that Philip Griffiths brought to the presentation. I find it extremely hard to comprehend that someone that resides in Claremont, probably plays golf with the developer and gets paid by the developer, has not consulted with the local community and say that it holds little significance to it. So before you approve a self-appointed award-winning Great Wall badged as a Lamborghini to put on show at one of your top tourist hubs, please support Councillor Baker's motion. Before you have a turd you can't polish, but perhaps you could paint it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schaefer. We have another list. I'm on another list here, and our next question is Rocco Caratazico. Okay, if you could kindly make your way to the podium. You have a question to ask?
In regards to what?
I've just got you down on the list as questions for the council meeting, but it doesn't matter if you haven't got a question.
I didn't put a specific question for it, for anything specific.
Okay.
I was just waiting to see if there is anything that I need to address.
All right, okay.
I'm not sure where that came from, to be honest.
All right, no problem, but thank you for advising us of that. And the next question, Kylie O'Connor. And if I could please ask you to state your name and address for our records, thank you.
Okay. My name's Kylie O'Connor. My address is 98 Lisford Avenue in Two Rocks. I've been a resident of Two Rocks for 21 years. I moved here from New South Wales.
That's okay.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. We absolutely do feel the passion and the, that genuine view of what everybody's saying in the room, and you're all speaking from the heart. So that's okay. Take a deep breath.
Thank you. So I've moved here from New South Wales. My husband and I had all our friends were down south. We decided to come to Yanship. It was a long drive back then, with only Wanneroo Road being accessible. We loved the area that much. We ended up buying in the town centre. I've had my 2 children, also born and bred in the Wanneroo and Joondalup and raised in Two Rocks. The reason I brought there was the fact that it was somewhere safe to walk around. You had the bush, you had the national park. If you wanted to go to the beach, there were so many activities around. Even though it was fenced, it was always great to take your dog into the Atlantis Park for a good walk and look at the statues. Kind of technically off the books, that one. That's most of the reason why I'm here. I do refer to it as the cul-de-sac of urban development when people ask me where Two Rocks is, as I believe it is the cul-de-sac of urban development for a long time. I'm happy for development to proceed, but just not in this manner. So therefore, I'd like to refer to the proposed Woolworths development, currently sorry. Being assessed and decisions being made upon. There has been much discussion about the heritage value of the land, which is also closely linked with the tourism values of the area. It's an absolute shame that the Heritage Council has not, for reasons unclear, assessed the King Neptune statue and surrounding Turox Marina area for the heritage status since 2003. It has left us in a position where we are relying upon the Heritage Impact Statement now, which was prepared in 2006, being over 15 years ago. It was ultimately paid for by the developer to support the developer's intention in our area. The Heritage Act 2018, State Heritage Place, perhaps instead of relying upon the Heritage Impact Statement, there should have been some onus upon the city in determining the authority to make the independent inquiries on the matter. A good place to start would be probably the Heritage Act 2018 of Western Australia. This what makes a state heritage register place. And if the place is registered, what kind of considerations are taken into account when a new development is proposed for the place? In order for a place to be entered into the state register, the Heritage Council must determine that the place is of cultural heritage and significance, having regard to a number of factors, some of which are the importance in demonstrating characteristics of the broader class of places, any strong or special meaning it may have for any strong or special meaning it may have for any group or community because of the social, cultural or spiritual associations. It's important in exhibiting a particular aesthetics of characteristic and valued by any group or community, and any special association it may have with the life or work of a person, group, organisation or importance in Western Australian history. It also has to demonstrate a high degree of creativity, of creative or technical achievement, and most importantly, the place must have heritage significance despite lacking physical material and substance that contributes to cultural heritage. Just on that note, back in 2006, this was by the City of Wanneroo, lodged by the Finney Group. And this was the blueprint within this report to demolish, and it's a detailed plan on how they can easily remove our statue. Many of the factors I just listed, in my opinion, and I'm sure you would agree, are relevant not only to the King Neptune statue, but for the former site of the Atlantis Marine Park and the broader marina in the Turox area. State Heritage Place view corridor protections. One of the factors that we keep highlighting is the views to form to and from the King Neptune statue. Some of the state heritage places actually include protections on the view of the corridor from prominent areas in the heritage place. For example, Fremantle Prison conservation policy includes protection of the vistas or glimpses of the prison from different areas within the Fremantle, and it provides a visual link and with other elements of the establishment should be restrained and reinforced or re-established. The policy also provides things such as parking not being visible from the terrace. I imagine that, the view from King Neptune overlooking the kingdom, the ocean, is something that could be protected under any current or future consideration of his heritage status, and therefore should be important to consider when a determination is made on the development of this application. heritage impact assessments for state heritage places include with an agenda. It's important to note that pro forma heritage impact statement that is required to be provided for most development proposals which will affect the state heritage place includes consideration of the following facts. How the impact of the new development on the heritage significance of the place or area are to be minimised. 2, why is the development required to be adjacent to a heritage place? 3, how does the new development affect the views to and from a heritage place, and what has been done to minimise the negative effects? 4, is the development sympathetic to the heritage place? In what way, example, forms of seating, proportions, designs, materials? Will the new buildings visually dominate the heritage place, and how has this been minimised? 6, will the public and the users of the place still be able to view and appreciate its significance? In our view and the community's view, these considerations have not been addressed adequately by the proponents, and therefore the development proposal should not be recommended for approval by the City of Wanneroo, and I'd really like everyone's support so everyone who does move to that area and their families like mine can grow up and enjoy the environment that's around them. Not rubbish, not trolleys, and not trucks madly screaming next to a skate park. Thank you very much, everyone, for your time, and I'm sorry that I had a meltdown. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms O'Connor. Most certainly spoken from the heart, and Mr Bowring will take those comments that you made towards the end, the questions that you made, and we'll put those to the JDAP. We have no more names on the register to ask questions, and just to reassure everybody that I can tell the time. I was just very loath to stop the presentations, the statements, and the questions, because we want to thank you for supporting your local community. That passion and that pride and that absolute feeling of leave, do not progress with this application came through loud and clear. And I also want to say that thank you. You have touched so many hearts, as has Two Rocks over the years. And I'm not talking about just the local community. I'm talking about the community from within Wanneroo, around, into intrastate, interstate, and indeed overseas. Atlantis and Two Rocks has touched so many people, and council acknowledges and understands you coming down to speak to us and put your views and wear your hats on your sleeves and convey that passion for the area to this council. As you know, we are not the decision makers. It is going to JDAP, and as you also know, Councillor Baker has got an amendment which will be considered when the item does come to council. But on behalf of the elected members, thank you. Thank you for being here and putting your views forward. And they were authentic views too.
Mayor, can I just ask, one of the questions that were asked of Ms Blenkenhoff with regard to whether the city can have another look at the structure plan, I think was her question. And obviously I'd like to get that clarified, whether the city can look at the structure plan again. Obviously we can't change it for this particular process, but I was just wondering whether Mr Bowring could answer that component, please.
Yes, I mean, who take that on notice, but Mr Bowring, you're able to answer that question now.
Yeah, yes, thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. Yes, that's certainly a possibility. If council were to instruct the administration, we'd be able to do that.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes public question and statement time. Moving on to item 4, confirmation of the minutes of the ordinary council meeting held on the 15th of March 2022. Can I please have a mover and seconder? Thank you, Councillor Treby, and thank you, Councillor Civic. Councillors, a confirmation of minutes. Can I please ask you to cast your vote? I declare those minutes carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 5, announcements by the Mayor without discussion. There are none. Item 6, questions from council members. Councillor Rowe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question is in regards to bus shelters in the suburb of Girraween. I believe administration is aware that 3 bus shelters were removed when some stops were realigned by the Public Transport Authority. Those were shelters along Blackmore Avenue and Templeton Crescent in Girraween. The shelters were opposite to a park that is very well used, close to a shopping centre precinct, and also next to a development that is recently complete. The buses go to, or previously went to, Perth Busport in the city, and now go to Warwick train station, which is very well utilised. So I just wanted to ask administration if they could provide an update regarding the future of these bus shelters. And Mayor, if I can, there's 2 other parts to the question afterwards.
Yes, absolutely, Councillor Rowe. Mr. Singh.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. We have assessed the need for new bus shelters in that particular street. There were 2 existing shelters which were removed as part of a reorganisation of the existing bus stops in that street. We will be looking at starting a process to reinstall 2 of those bus shelters soon.
Thank you.
And I believe the reinstallation timeline was roughly August 2022. I do appreciate administration's response, but I am conscious that that would potentially leave residents stranded out in the cold and in the wet through most of winter. So I was just asking, part 2 of the question is it possible to bring forward at all the reinstallation process, given how well utilised those bus shelters are?
Thank you. Mr. Singh.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Again, the process to reinstall shelters does take time. We will need to develop some designs for the hard stand for those bus shelters, and also need to consult with the adjoining community members where the new bus stops have gone in. So after that one, we will then receive the feedback from community members. If that's supported, then we try to do fast track that one. But at this point in time, we're looking at the bus shelters could be placed in that particular street by August 2022. That still, again, we may encounter some material supply shortages. If that happens, we'll adjust the schedule accordingly.
And just the third part, I've become somewhat of an expert on the bus shelter policy because I read it backwards and forwards. It doesn't really mention at this stage any of these sort of circumstances where a shelter would be removed due to a decision by the Public Transport Authority. So I was just hoping, is there any way that administration could, or with council, review this policy in the future, just so it takes a look at circumstances where a shelter is removed, what the appropriate course of action is going forward, just in case it does arise again in the future?
Thank you, Councillor Rowe. Mr. Singh.
Yes, Madam Mayor, when the policy is up for renewal again, we can definitely consider that. But in the meantime, administration's approach will be that if an existing shelter is removed and bus stop is relocated, we will try to provide the bus shelters at the relocated location.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Rowe, and thank you, Mr. Singh. Further questions? There be no further questions. Item 7, petitions. We have a petition from Councillor Kutsia.
Thank you. I've got a petition here with 96 signatures to revoke the approval for the cutting down of the trees along Capricorn Esplanade in Yanshep. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kutsia. Can I please have a mover and seconder that the petition be noted and referred to administration? Thank you, Councillor Wright, and thank you, Councillor Baker. And if I could please ask you to cast your vote. It's carried unanimously. Thank you, and thank you, Councillor Kutsia, for presenting that. Item 8, the reports, and if I could please ask.
Mayor, can I please move to bring the item PSO forward to the beginning of the agenda as everyone comes from
we already have, I think, that, but I'm happy to, Councillor Treby seconding, but before I do that, if you let me finish. So councillors, if there are any declarations of interest, if you could please kindly state your declaration of interest when we get to the particular item. Thank you. Yes, Councillor Treby.
Just in respect to that, with in respect to PSO4, can I also request that we immediately after that go to CS 040422 as well and bring that forward?
Thank you, Councillor Treby. So we now have a motion for PS04 to be heard at the start of the agenda, and that will be followed by CS04. So, councillors, we've got a procedural motion. If I could please ask you to cast your vote on that procedural motion. Ready? Thank you. Declare that carried unanimously. PS04. So we do have an amendment to PS04, but if I could please ask for somebody to move the substantive recommendation. Pro forma. Thank you, Councillor Treby. And do we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Miles.
Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Miles. I've got you as seconding the amendment, so you can't move the substantive and second the amendment. Oh, it's Councillor Coetzee. We've got Councillor Miles, so Councillor Coetzee. If we could please change the proposed amendment to the recommendation. It actually does say PS04, seconded by Councillor Miles, but that's Councillor Coetzee. Thank you. So, councillors, if you could please make sure that you make that note on your... So we have got the PS04 moved by Councillor Treby, seconded by Councillor Miles and Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Pursuant to clause 5.10 of the Standing Orders 2008, I would like to move an amendment to the primary motion. The amendment has been circulated to councillors, and I can... Sorry,
Councillor Baker. Yes, I've already acknowledged that there is an amendment.
Is it necessary for me to read it into the transcript, so to speak? Or
well, I'm just going to ask the mover and second of the substantive, which is pro forma, if they wish to speak to this item, and then I'll go straight to you as the mover, and then straight to Councillor Coetzee as the seconder. Thank you. So, Councillor...
Sorry, Madam Mayor. Look, I would like to make a declaration on this particular item.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you. Before we get into the proceedings of it, thank you, Madam Mayor. With regards to item PSO2-4/22, the consideration of the amendment. Sorry, wrong one. Beg your pardon.
So, Councillor
PSO4. Yes.
PSO4.
Just a second. Yes. Sorry. PSO4-4/22, consideration of responsible authority report relating to the proposed shop, liquor store, restaurant and office at 10 Enterprise Avenue, Turox. With regards to this item, I disclose that I am a member of the Joint Development Assessment Panels and hence have an interest in this matter from that perspective. As a consequence, there may be a perception that my impartiality on the matter may be affected. I declare that I will consider this matter on its merits and vote accordingly. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Civic. Councillor Miles.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Yes, with regard to item PSO4/04/22, I disclose that I'm also a member for the JDAP for the city, and as a consequence, there may be a perception that my impartiality on the may be affected. I declare that I will consider this matter on its merits and vote accordingly.
Thank you, Councillor Miles. Councillor Huntley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I too need to disclose that obviously I have an interest in the matter as I also serve on the JDAP panel, but I am a deputy and have not been involved in this item. As a consequence, there may be a perception that my impartiality on the matter may be affected, and I declare that I will consider this matter on its merits and vote accordingly.
Thank you, Councillor Huntley. There be no further declarations of interest. So we've got PSO4 moved pro forma, Councillor Treby, and seconded Councillor Miles. And so, Councillor Treby, you don't wish to speak on this item?
Not at this stage, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. And Councillor Miles? No. So we now go to the amendment. The amendment has been moved by Councillor Baker and seconded by Councillor Coetzee. Councillor Baker?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. If I could speak in support of the amendment. Once again, the amendment has been circulated to elected members and also to members of the public, as far as I'm aware. Yes, thank you once again, Madam Mayor. I'll try and be very brief. I may seek a brief extension at the end of this spiel, so to speak. In any event, Madam Mayor, at the outset, I'd like to thank the local Turox residents, Arlene Benkendoff and Alan Shuttleton, JP, for their hundreds of hours, literally hundreds of hours, spent thoroughly researching and analysing and highlighting the deficiencies of the terms of the Woolworths development application currently before the Council, and also analysing, of course, the appropriate districts plans, structure plans, etc., precinct plans and the like. For the record, I wholly endorse their observations and submissions raised by them during the course of their respective statements to the Council this evening, as well as those of the other like-minded Turox residents. My respectful submission to my fellow elected members is quite simple, that the case against the approval of this DA by the JDAP has, the case against it has overwhelming merit. The case is clearly a no-case submission. This is based on the terms of the city's planning policies and also the fundamental tenets of what is often described as good, orderly planning principles. A proposed shopping centre development of the size and scale and type and location set out in this DA is far better suited to be located in the new, fully precinct planned Turox City Centre, to be located on Breakwater Drive, some 200 metres to the east of the Atlantis Beach Baptist College. Please note the name of that school. It has some significance, I would have thought. In 10 years' time, that new city centre will be surrounded by some 22,000 residential lots, stretching all the way north, believe it or not, to Dundebar Road, which of course is the northern boundary of the City of Wanneroo, and for that matter, the northern boundary of the Perth Metropolitan area. That future city centre site will be developed before we know it. A 7 to 10 year timeline is but a short time span in the historical urbanisation of a city's residential coastal strip. Just look at how quickly our coastal strip has been significantly urbanised over the last 10 years, with obviously residential subdivisions, small shopping centre areas, commercial premises, and also all the tens upon tens of millions of dollars in infrastructure spent on providing services to those lots, as well as all the other developments. Look at the various extensions to date of the Mitchell Freeway. Look at the opening up of opening up of Marmion Avenue, the dualling of Marmion Avenue. Look at the metro train extension on the northern suburbs line to Yanship. All these things happen very quickly. Time can go very fast, and life can be too short sometimes. In short form, the reasons for the rejection of this DA are succinctly set out in the 7 sub-paragraphs in my amendment. The reasons have been thoroughly thought through after a forensic town planning analysis of the Woolies DA, and also the responsible authority report, the city's own report, prepared by the city's administration, to be filed with JDAP, or has been filed with JDAP, I should say. In my view, it's the elected members of this council that should guide and determine the future planning of our city, not the city's administration acting in comparative isolation. Equally, it is the residents of our city, and in this particular case, with this particular DA, it is the residents of Turox who are in a far better position to determine the heritage and cultural significance of the King Neptune statue and the Atlantis precinct, and also, of course, the Marina precinct as a tourism precinct. The residents should be the people who are the driving force. The residents need to be consulted and listened to, not the learned, so-called learned town planning and heritage experts working and living in Perth's leafy western suburbs. Those experts may be of the view that the King Neptune statue is some old clapped-out 1980s icon from a bygone era. But it is our very own Turox icon, not theirs, and the views of our city's local residents should be given the same, if not greater weight, when assessing the icon's relevance in the development of its surrounding land, particularly from a town planning perspective. In short, I therefore ask that my fellow elected members join with me in saying a resounding no to the Woolwich DA, proposed to be, for obvious reasons. It is located in the wrong place. It's completely out of scale and sync with its surroundings. It's out of sync with the King Neptune statue. It's out of sync with the Atlantis precinct. It's out of sync with the future development of the marina, and it will do nothing whatsoever to enhance the development of the surrounding tourism and marina precincts in Turox. I urge elected members to vote in support of my amendment and hence vote down the Woolies DA. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Baker. Councillor Coetzee.
Thank you. Me and Councillor Baker have worked endless hours on this. Meetings with the residents, we went to the houses, we had phone calls, we had lots of coffees. I'm so over coffee. But besides that, I just want to say thank you to Councillor Baker as well, because he's got the law background and he went through these documents inch by inch in so much detail. So thank you for that. If I go to the gallery, I have never seen this gallery so full of an item where there's residents from Two Rocks. And why? Because we don't want this. We don't want this structure to be built there. We want the tourist feel there. Why? I know there's policies, regulations, structure planning, all those things. I know there's JDAP, where they basically bypass council. I suppose there is a benefit into that for the people who do take that application to JDAP. But to me, it feels like to have all of the policies and regulations, and so maybe there should be something where they do have to go and ask the residents first, what do you want? What would you like here? What do you think that will work here? What will not work here? And how much do you love this place? Maybe they should go and ask people that lives there, that have grown up there the whole time. To have a premises constructed there, big building, a massive car park, a liquor store, right next to the main road. I don't know, that just doesn't feel, it doesn't sit with me as an entrance statement to go in there. To me, it feels like, I've been in Australia now for 16 years, and I've been in Yanchep now for 12 years. And I'm quite close to Two Rocks, and I absolutely love that area. For that building to be right next to the Neptune statue, I don't know. Where's the tourist feel? People go into Woolworths, go get their groceries, maybe have a coffee. Oh, there's King Neptune. Oh, really nice. It doesn't have that. Where's that feeling? Where's that heritage? I mean, what's the feel about it? To me, it doesn't mean, I don't know, it doesn't mean really so much to me. I think something more can be done there to have a touristy feel there. There's a big open space on the other side where industrial areas, shopping centres, Woolworths, and the Bunnings can go. So to me, I'm actually very sad in this whole process, because to me it feels like maybe they should just, the petition that was signed, I mean, doesn't that mean something? Again, structure plans, policies, regulations. Who cares about a petition? I care about a petition. Why are you here? I've never seen, I've been a councillor now for 4.5 years, and I've never seen one item on an agenda with so many statements that people is against what's happening. What does that say to you guys? To me, that say, please help out, guys. Please, councillors, support this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Coetzee, and I speak wholeheartedly in favour of the amendment put forward by Councillor Baker and seconded by Councillor Coetzee. Without a doubt, Two Rocks is unique. It's the furthermost point of the City of Wanneroo and also Metropolitan area. Urban sprawl is happening, but Two Rocks is unique. It's got personality. And Councillor Sangali will often speak about the personality of Old Quinns, the undulation. One of the things that I would like to say, and I don't think anybody would disagree with me, is that everybody knows where Two Rocks is. Everybody knows about Neptune. And Neptune has a piece of the heart of everybody because it's iconic, it's unique, and it actually deserves fighting for, and the local area. And I think Aileen before talked about, and Alan talked about, Margaret River, and how Margaret River has been developed, and they've got everything in Margaret River, but it fits in keeping with that natural area. and with creativity, achievements can be made. And I absolutely support this, and I could speak a long time. I'm not going to, but I would like the community know that we have listened. We're not the decision makers in this, but we can hopefully, as a council, send a very clear message about this. So once again, thank you, and I do support the amendment that's been put forward. Speakers against? Thank you, Councillor Civic.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, I'm really put in a very unenviable position here because I'm actually a joint development assessment panellist on this particular item, which makes it very difficult for me. And I'm not saying that I don't disagree or agree with these things, etc., that have come up, but I, being a panel member, I did actually move the procedural motion to send this back for heritage investigation to absolutely see what potential this had as a heritage site. I remember this site in 1980 when I actually worked for the Shire of Wanneroo, and Alan Bond opened this particular marine park and commissioned the sculptor to sculpt King Neptune and all the statues that are still in survival in and around the area, around the IGA store and the tavern. I took a good look at the site last weekend, and I'm caught in a very unenviable position because this will ultimately come to the Joint Development Assessment Panel in 3 or 4, probably a couple of weeks' time. So I'm very open on it. I'm not discounting or agreeing because, unfortunately, whilst this recommendation has that reason, administration or council is not the deciding body on it, and I'm going to have to really relook at the situation when we meet in 2 weeks' time. But I have the greatest empathy for this particular area. I've seen the park when Bond opened it, and then it lasted 10 years, and it was closed down, as many of the other heritage areas in Wanneroo in my history here since 1967, and one was the Bullens Lion Park. There have been other ones which have been failures everywhere, and it's disappointing that this had to happen to this particular site because in its heyday, they had the Birdman Rally in the marina. It was a fantastic success, but in times of community and the economic situations, these all tapered off, and obviously it was no longer a viable business venture. But I will take this on board, so I want you all to understand that I am in this unenviable position that I can't support it on the basis that I'm a panellist. So I hope you understand that at this point in time. So thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Civic. Speakers for. Thank you, Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to clarify this is in support of Councillor Baker's motion.
Speak in favour of the amendment, yes.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to start off by saying if it doesn't look right and it doesn't sound right, then maybe it isn't right. I'm absolutely heartbroken for this community up in Two Rocks, and I was one of those interested councillors who attended the JDAP meeting virtually, as I know how much this location means for not only the Two Rocks community, but also Western Australia. I know for myself that this location holds significant heritage importance, and that Atlantis Marine Park held many memories for generations, as I have seen photos from my grandparents and my parents that this was their holiday spot in Perth. I know for me, I looked back on my photo albums and I saw pictures of me hugging the King Neptune statue. However, I wouldn't put the entire blame on the Finney Group tonight, as there were multiple stages before this that should be highlighted tonight. And my speech splits into two. The first that I want to bring up is the Two Rocks District Structure Plan should have never been approved, and I have no idea what was going on through the councillors at the time, but this parcel of land should have been something natural or a heritage park outlining the importance of the local area and telling the story of the creation of Two Rocks. 2, where were the delegates to the Heritage Service Advisory Group? Where was the advocacy all these years? It seems to me that there was a lack of action from both the city and also the Heritage Council. these heritage statuses that should have been dealt with follow-ups, as I know if the city wants to get something done, it pursues all avenues. And I know for me that the assessment was pending from 2003. I was 2 years old at that time. I had enough time to go through school and almost graduate from my degree. The third point that I would like to make is JDAP should be abolished. It is a disadvantage to both the city and the community, as we are always outnumbered and will lose every single time, as it's based on an old-fashioned system. It takes the heart out of what we do, and without the heart we cannot move forward. After listening to all the speakers from both the JDAP and deputations, I will be supporting the refusal of this application report to JDAP based on the following reasons. 1, I do not believe there was enough formal community consultation undertaken. 2, this site will not fit the purpose and goals of the local area, being a coastal, retail and tourism precinct, especially next to an iconic landmark. 3, it does not adequately address the heritage and cultural values of the local area, King Neptune statue and former Atlantis Marine Park. 4, the design of the proposal will remove the iconic ocean view and impact due to its scale and appearance. 5, it will have amenity impacts increasing traffic, waste and noise, and does not comply with the city's parking policy. 6, it will provide health and safety concerns to visitors who visit the statue, that air fumes will blow from the centre towards the statue, creating a hazard and ruining that peace and tranquility that is currently there. I urge all councillors to support this, the refusal of the application, and that this be sent to JDAP immediately, because this is a multi-generational issue. It is affecting young people, it is affecting retirees, it is affecting established families, and it is impacting new families that are moving to the area. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Speakers against? Speakers for? Councillor Treby.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I think I'll start off by just remarking there are a couple of points Councillor Wright made. One was, and I agree with most of what Councillor Wright said. However, when he referred to the action in 2014, there were members of this council were here, and it was made with full basis of fact, evidence and findings. It's the way it's been used now. So should have been approved. It was a principle that is approved. It's in its application and implementation. So I just want to make that point. Look, I'm happy to support the recommendation, and we've heard the passion. And it's not the first time there have been passionate debates in these chambers. I'll just take this off so I can take some water. But all the passion in the world won't get us to where we need to get to, because we can argue passion, we can debate passion, but unfortunately this is the exercise of public law, and that's how this is dealt with. We need to have a look at how we can best impact and affect the decision that might come up or that will come up at a future JDAP meeting. I just want to underpin this. We are not the decision makers, and I note that the recommendation does say that we recommend it be refused or we refused. We cannot vote it down. We do not have the power. We cannot exercise that power. It is ultra vires. However, we can send the message on behalf of the community to influence what is said and how it's presented. Well, I agree with the preeminent position that Neptune has. If you talk about King Neptune, everybody knows that you're talking about Two Rocks. It's part of our vernacular. It's part of our culture. And many people hark back to those days with fond memories. It was built after I was home with my parents, but I had the great joy of taking my children there, and they do remember it, and it's a fantastic place. The issue of, and it was raised in the deputations quite wisely, and I'm not a heritage architect, but the issue of culture is, in my view, every bit as important as heritage. It's always very difficult. Now, and I'll just provide relevance to that. It's always very difficult to talk about heritage when you're talking about Aboriginal culture. It's only now starting to be recognised for its heritage value. And it's needed that debate to mature over time. And that's the discussion and the debate that we need to get into this argument over time as well. Because culture, even recent culture, should have a significant impact and effect on decisions that are made. But it was the point was brought up about the Fremantle prison, and quite right. It is World Heritage listed. There are 2 listings. There was a reference to the view corridors, and indeed that's correct. And it is the very view corridor from the front gates at the prison right the way down through to the port. That is sacrosanct. You cannot even touch the trees because it's that view corridor which holds the cultural significance and the heritage significance. And I put it to the JDAP that the view corridor from King Neptune is every bit as significant. I'd also like to say and this all becomes an exercise, whenever there's an exercise of power, it comes with limitations. And it also comes with the capacity to discern a decision, and also in the exercise of power being somewhat circumspect about the use of discretion. And this is important and I was just studying this today. It's a Professor Kavanagh, and he spoke about the exercise of power in the public law sense. It should not be exercised arbitrarily, because the one thing you always use, and this is what we're talking about, it's the exercise of power, and on the planning instruments, because they are legal instruments, it's the exercise of power on the basis of what the planning instruments are. Now, the fact of the matter is that it should not be treated arbitrarily and just accepted out of hand.
Councillor Treby, I need to go for an extension of time. How many minutes?
Oh, just a couple, Madam Mayor.
2 minutes, thank you.
Yep.
Moved Councillor Civic, seconded Councillor Sangali. Any objections? Declare that carried. Continue.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, councillors. It is the exercise of power because at the end of the day, when you've got an instrumentality who exercises public law, and the JDAP, and I absolutely agree with Councillor Wright on this point, I dislike, and sorry, Councillor Civic, I hate the JDAP process because it takes this out of the decision-making process. And whenever you're talking about public law and decision-making and the exercise of power, it should always be exercised and tested against the public interest test. So unequivocally, I think there needs to be some consideration of what that public interest test is. And I want to just finish on this one point. And if this is possible, a message that might be picked up by our friends on JDAP, if you don't have the sufficient evidence, and if you accept it should not be a decision made arbitrarily, you should also take into consideration the precautionary principle. If you don't have the evidence and it's clear there is some angst in the community, you should exercise the precautionary principle and not make a decision because you don't have the complete evidence, findings or facts. That's the message I want to send. Passion is good. Passion's absolutely important, but it's getting down to how you actually affect the real decision that needs to be made, not by us. We're not the decision makers, but we have to get that message across, and it's on the basis of exercise power of public law with those instruments to make sure that they're aware that they should apply the precautionary principle and there should be a public interest test. And I support Councillor Baker's amendment on this wholeheartedly.
Thank you, Councillor Treby. Speakers against?
Question, Madam Mayor, if I may.
Councillor Civic.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, I asked the question in reference to the question asked by Council, I think it was Miles, to Mr Bowring regarding the structure plan, and Mr Bowring acknowledged by saying that if something goes to administration, that it could be looked at by administration in some way. And I don't mean to put him on the spot on this, but bearing in mind that this particular meeting might happen within 2 weeks' time, what would be the process required to instigate some refusal methods on that structure plan, if that were at all possible, Madam Mayor?
Thank you, Councillor Surbiton. Mr Bowring.
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. There isn't any avenue to act through the structure plan at this stage. A structure plan amendment is a fairly lengthy process and ultimately is subject to approval by the state government. So it's a multi-stage approval process.
Thank you. Speakers against? Speakers for? Councillor Sangali.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Throughout this, first of all, thank you to everyone from Two Rocks for making the trek here. I know it's a long drive sometimes, especially at night and when you've been at work, so thank you very much for coming along. This report focuses a lot on the fact of a supermarket has been written into the structure plan, but what it's missed in the structure plan is that it also encourages heritage values, a coastal boutique development with an emphasis on tourism. I'm sure tourists are not travelling to Two Rocks to simply shop at Woolies. People are drawn to Two Rocks because of what, as Zakira mentioned, its uniqueness, just as they do at Hillary's, which also, funnily enough, doesn't have a Woolies. The application refers to the 2006 Heritage Assessment. 1,628 residents lived in Two Rocks at that time when that assessment was written. 1,628 men, women and children. Let's just say all of them had their say, which we know they didn't, on that structure plan consultation. That's still 872 less signatures against this, less than the signatures that are against this development that was tabled in Parliament. It's no wonder a 2006 heritage document does not recognise its true significance. 1975 was when Two Rocks became a suburb. Their heritage and history was not widely recognised. Why would it be? It's just over 30 years old when that heritage assessment was written. Two Rocks was not threatened by urban development on the size and scale that we see now. Instead, it had spent its past as a home of Atlantis, Two Rocks Marina, Birdman Rally. In 2006, the entire residential area fitted within a 2.5 kilometre area with this site right in the middle. As far as the structure plan goes and the community consultation that went into it, the main themes included retaining King Neptune, maintaining current aesthetics of the town and a building height no larger than 2 stories, inclusion of additional shops, cafes, boutiques, medical facilities and other recreational facilities, a green buffer along Lisford Ave. Its retail strategy mentions the inclusion of the supermarket on a small main street as an anchor retail with additional tourism and recreational needs, surfwear, fishing, diving, even a tavern and wine bar, sympathetic to beachside and marina locations. This form of urban retail at Two Rocks is being defined as coastal boutique. I'm happy to support this alternative amendment. I'm more than happy to support this. I find it really hard to swallow that we can accept a planning report like this and say that a report that was written so long ago, we can define those decisions today on that report. So I'm more than happy to accept this.
Thank you, Councillor Sangali. Speakers against? Speakers for? Councillor Baker, we had one speaker against. Would you
Yes.
like to exercise your
Yes.
right of reply?
Yes, I'd like the right
Thank you.
of reply and thereby close the debate. Just to note at the outset that whilst this amendment tonight appears in my name, it is essentially the hard work and the product of Aline Blickendorf, I should say, and Alan Shuttleton. I wish to acknowledge that. Next, I agree that JDAP should be abolished. There's no doubt about that. Next, I agree that any responsible authority report issued by the city, our city in the future, regarding any shopping centre complex or development should first of all be vetted and run past the councillors, the elected members of the city first, and be approved first before it's submitted to JDAP. I thank Councillor Wright for his contribution during the course of this discussion. And just for the record, there can be no doubt about it, my amendment does not state that we are acting as a decision-making body and making a decision regarding this development application. As it states in its preamble, and I quote, recommends to the Outer Metro Joint Development Assessment Panel, refusal. So we are just recommending a refusal. We are not making a decision as to a refusal because we don't have the power or jurisdiction to do that. JDAP does. And in due course, there can, if the applicant is unsatisfied with the outcome of the JDAP hearing, then the applicant can seek a review to the State Administrative Tribunal. Beyond that, all I'd like to say once again is what's being proposed is common sense. The DA should not be approved for planning reasons. I know there are lots of other reasons, but once again, we're dealing with planning issues. We have to deal with principles of planning, planning policy, etc., etc., etc. It doesn't stack up. It's in the wrong place. And I would have thought the JDAP members would see this as being pretty obvious and say, not this place, look elsewhere. Perhaps do a land swap with the developer further up the main drag, so to speak, and maybe then you'll get it up. So, yes, so thanks very much to members who contributed. Thanks to Turox residents who attended. And once again, thanks to Arlene and also Alan for their assistance, tremendous assistance over the last month or so. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Baker. So, councillors, we have the amendment moved Councillor Baker, seconded by Councillor Coetzee. If you could please cast your vote. I can't see the picture. Right, thank you. So that's carried, and we have two Councillor Civic and Councillor Huntley against. Thank you very much. So, councillors, putting the substantive recommendation as amended. All those in favour, if you could please, or against, if you could please cast your vote. Declare that carried, and we have one against, Councillor Civic. Thank you. That concludes PS04. So anybody from Turox is very welcome to leave the chambers and make your way home. And I do have to say, as you're leaving with Mr. Schaefer, when you talked about the calendar of the City of Wanneroo, really good point, but there probably would have been about another 10 that we could have chosen as well. It's very, very photogenic and very popular. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Shuttleton. Oh, and I'll just wait until the gallery emptied. Safe journey home. What shows kangaroos? Thank you. The next item that we have brought forward is it's on page 240, CS04. Thank you. And we also have a CSO4. We also have an amendment to CSO4. So can I please have a mover to the substantive recommendation CSO4? The substantive. Thank you, Councillor Baker. And do I have a seconder? Oh, thank you, Councillor Rowe. Okay, so we've got the mover and seconder of the substantive, and we also have the amendment, and the amendment is moved Councillor Berry and seconded Councillor Miles. Yes, so Councillor Berry, if you'd like to speak to your amendment, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I put up the amendment. I'm assuming everybody's had a copy of it. And I'd just like to thank all the community members who've taken the time to share their personal experiences, views and concerns over the last few weeks. It's not always easy getting on that podium and speaking to us. I know that. Like many, I wish the state government who brought in the mandates that council are bound by had provided a forum for all community to share, as they have with this and other local councils. It would have been appreciated by many if they had been as open to listening as we have been at the City of Wanneroo. I am aware of the impacts to mental health, and for those that know me, I have been directly impacted by restrictions and death due to COVID-19. I know some community members can currently not access facilities in the mental health space, as that is the sector I work in. Representatives from that sector have been made to the state government to highlight the issues isolation and segregation has. I'm well aware of how you all feel segregated. This is the correct sector to highlight and demonstrate such impacts through the Mental Health Commission. I have proposed amendment tonight to ensure that you as the community who have done the deputations, who've done the hard work, who've helped their isolation, are also heard. The amendment is for all your deputations to be included in the letter to be sent by the Mayor. I hope that all my fellow councillors will support me and support the City writing to obtain all the relevant information that has seen a state of emergency be declared and a vaccination policy put in place, and that Council now requests the Minister of Health to revoke the public health state of emergency so we can all get back to being one community and be united. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Berry. And Councillor Miles?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And I do endorse the comments made by Councillor Berry, and just add to them that I'm very impressed with the electors meeting, with the deputations, that everybody came to the podium as suggested before and articulated the effect of what has happened to them personally over the last 18 months, 2 years, and how this venue and this local government was able to listen and hear all of that. And we are now going to move your voices that will be heard. We're going to pass those on to the elected representatives at a state level so they can hear for themselves your positions and your voices and your concerns that had happened over the past 18 months, 2 years. And it is hard with the challenges where it's not always been fair. Not everybody has been treated fair. You know, some people got some sort of respite of monetary value, whether from the federal government or the state government. But there was a lot of businesses out there that really got nothing. They were just told to shut the door and suck it up on behalf of the community. And I do think that was wrong. I do believe that those business people should be given the right compensation that they deserve, especially when it comes to paying their rents and leases and other ongoing costs that they couldn't just turn off. They've had to either add it onto their mortgages and going through. I've known daycares in the area that were told, you have to stay open, but you're only going to get 50% of your costs reimbursed. That's just not fair and not right when you're still paying out for those wages that were coming through. So I too were very, very supportive of all of those that came along. It was articulated so well. I was very impressed with all of the speakers, and I do want to congratulate you all for being and coming along and giving us the opportunity as your local government to listen so we can pass it on to the state government on your behalf. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Miles. Speakers for? Councillor Rowe. Wright.
Thank you, Mayor. This is certainly a tough issue, as I see both sides of this debate. I appreciate all the deputations we heard at the special electors meeting and last week's briefing session. This certainly isn't a one-fix solution. However, as you see, the world around us is becoming back to some sort of normality. Flights to Bali have returned, over-east face masks and other restrictions have lifted, and cruise ships are returning back to Australian waters. I know this pandemic wasn't something anyone had planned for, and I know it hasn't been easy for residents, ratepayers, government, and small and medium-sized businesses. I know through my own experience of being a casual hospitality worker that when the pandemic had started, we had no support and we were the first ones to be stood down. I know when I started my next job, I was the first one to have to go into isolation because we had our very first lockdown in the state and I happened to be there at the same time. I understand the issues that this has caused residents and businesses with all restrictions, the financial and employment losses and mental health deterioration. I'm glad that we are the best performing state in the world in combating the virus, and I agree that the steps that we had to take was necessary, but now it is time to stop. I'm happy to go on the record. I want to be very, very clear. I'm not anti-vaccine, but I am anti-vaccine mandate. Everyone should have a choice whether they wish to be vaccinated, whether it be religious, personal or medical. As the Premier and Prime Minister have both said, we are one of the highest vaccination populations in the world. There is no point in continuing this harsh stance, which I agreed with at the start of the pandemic to help prepare us for COVID-19. I think we have never been in a better position than now to start lifting some of these vaccine mandates, as I know it is hurting residents and local businesses in all parts of the state. I'm happy with the recommendation and Councillor Berry's recommendation, and thank all the speakers for sharing their stories and experiences with the Council, and hope soon enough we will return back to a functioning society. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Speakers against? Speakers for? Councillor Civic.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I also, in agreement with what has been said to this point in time, I'm also respectful of the fact that people should have a choice. I am worried that this particular pandemic may be around for a long, long time. I worry also the fact that the side effects that people might get from these, especially young people, etc., in the future, whether they have underlying conditions or not. But I do respect the rights of people to do as they please, whether there's a risk in it or not. I hope that this sends a message to the state government, but I'm just worried that in time, or this will take a long time to readjust, but certainly respecting your position. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Civic. Speakers against? Speakers for? Councillor Treby.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I just want to just make a couple of points. And clearly, I think with the special electors meeting, the passion, the stories, not stories, the expression of personal impact, I think is a better way to put that, came through loud and clear, and they were indeed genuine. Can I say it's more about pro-choice rather than anti-vax, I think, and that's going to be important going into the future. I think for anyone and everyone who has that position has a right to express their view. Absolutely has a right to express their view. I'd also encourage you to renew your passion, because I fear we will have additional strains that will be with us for many years to come. I fear that's going to be the case. So all I can say is, unfortunately, to take a position against that which has lawfully been taken by the state government for us would be ultra vires. It would be on powers. We were not in a position to do that. However, passing those messages and stances and information onto the state, who have the rights and responsibilities for those decisions, is the right thing to do. But if I can just leave you with this one thought, maintain your passion, renew your passion, because I fear with the strains that will be coming, and I'm sure they will, this will be with us for some time.
Thank you, Councillor Treby. Speakers against? Speakers for, Councillor Baker.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I'll be very brief. The amendments recommended by Councillor Berry make common sense. Of course, they give further meaning, so to speak, to the gist of what's intended in the substantive recommendation. Common sense amendments. In terms of the state of emergency, sure, that was necessary at the start, so to speak, but to have a state of emergency in place now today is an absolute farce. It's a joke. We have people travelling from interstate, people travelling from overseas. We're welcoming them here. Sure, you have to have a G2G pass. So what? They're easy to get. Negative tests, RATs test, etc. But to still say we're in a state of emergency is nonsense. That is absolute nonsense. If we were in a state of emergency, the state would be locked down. If we were a true state of emergency, not a fake state of emergency, the state would be locked down. Western Australia would be divided up into regions. We wouldn't be able to travel from region to region, just as happened with the outset of the so-called pandemic state of emergency. The other thing, of course, which is ludicrous, and my wife Sarah's just returned back from Melbourne. In Melbourne, which we all used to sit back and think, what they're doing there is just totally over the top, totally over the top. The masks are only required to be worn on public transport. That's Melbourne. We are the last state to essentially come out of what's called the state of emergency. The mask wearing, of course, is ludicrous. There is no medical or scientific evidence which says that it's beneficial at this point in time, given that the pandemic is petering out. In terms of vaccine mandates, of course, these have impacted upon not just emergency workers, police, nurses, etc. It's also impacted upon patients, of course, members of the public generally, as shortage of nurses and police who would otherwise be on duty, of course, has prejudiced, if you like, the public sector's ability to provide the key services which support the health system, of course, and law and order. But anyhow, my understanding is that the police, at least, have been recently released from the vaccine mandates, and well and good. The other point too is, and this is what really gets me, it's got me from day one. If we were suffering a pandemic, and we were, in terms of how to deal with that, and if we were acting on the expert medical advice, bearing in mind that many medical experts can't agree, both nationally and internationally, at least what could have happened at the very least is for the public to be given copies of the medical advice, the written medical advice from the state's health officials or health experts, so we could weigh up the medical advice and then look at what steps were then introduced to deal with the medical advice or the, if you like, the downsides of the medical advice in terms of the need for lockdowns, mask wearing, quoted numbers in bars, public spaces, open public spaces. Anyhow, I'm sure that this state of emergency, my prediction is, and I'm not going to go into detail, but I do have a substantial bet on this. I was right when I bet that the state would not open on 5 February, but my prediction is that the state of emergency will disappear within, I'd say, 30 days after the forthcoming federal election. That's all. It'll be back to normality, and we'll say, thank you for releasing us from our captors. Thank you very much. We'll all become Paddy Hearst. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Speakers against? Speakers for? Okay, I'm going to put the amendment. There are no speakers against, Councillor Berry, so I'm going to put the amendment. Don't require a right of reply. If you could please cast your vote for the amendment. That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Putting the substantive recommendation as amended, if you could please cast your vote. Who's not voted? Councillor Civic. Thank you. Carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. So if there's anybody in the council chambers for that particular item that would like to now leave, you're very welcome to do so. Thank you. So moving them from the top now. I'll wait till people have moved. Thank you. Right, so thank you. So, councillors, PS01, can I please have a mover and seconder for PS01? Thank you, Councillor Miles, and seconded Councillor Rowe. Councillor Miles, you wish to speak to this item? Councillor Rowe? Speakers for? Against? Okay, putting PS01, if you could please cast your vote. Declare that carried unanimously. Thank you. PS02, we have an amendment for PS02. Pardon? An alternative. So we have an alternative for PS02. So if I could please, I'm going to ask for a mover and seconder, and if there is no mover or second, if that lapses, we'll go straight to the alternative. Okay, do I have a mover and seconder for PS02? We have no mover and seconder for PS02, so we'll go straight to the alternative, which everybody has in writing, and that's moved Councillor Wright and seconded Councillor Miles. So, Councillor Wright, PS02, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. I've brought this alternative recommendation to Council as this is a local, small family-run business that has long ties with the Wanneroo area. The owners have done the right thing by coming to Council rather than conducting business without the proper approvals, and I applaud Mr. and Mrs. Hancock for this. After carefully reading this report, I'll be supporting the amendment for the following reasons. The property on Prindleville Drive has been used as an office as far back as 12 years and has had no current issues to date. I recognise that this has been unapproved according to administration and don't encourage anyone to follow the same suit. However, the subject land was developed at the time when office was a discretionary use under the Town Planning Scheme number 1. Point 2. A councillor raised last week that parking would be an issue if this amendment was passed, and all I can say is this business has 2 employees, being the owners, and a maximum of 2 to 3 clients at one time, which translates to 2 or 3 cars at any one time. Third point. Administration has raised in its report that the impact of amenity would be impacted when you drive throughout Wangara, as majority of the buildings look office orientated and would not affect the look and feel of the area, as the design of the building isn't changing from its current form. Existing offices within Wangara still bear no impact on the amenity. Point 4, the property has been vacant and has been on the market for a number of years. This proposal will provide a benefit to the community and become a complementary business service to the industrial service businesses who often hire businesses like accountants, insurance services, support services and consultants that have an office use. This makes up a near 12% according to the 2016 census data, which is widespread within the Wangara Industrial Precinct and forms an integral component of its economic and employment mix. Point 5. The Perth Metropolitan strategic planning documents have been promoted the need for employment opportunities to be closer to where people live, and Wangara is a great spot that is surrounded by residential areas. The city is a signatory of the Small Business Friendly Local Government Charter and proposes to reduce red tape. Well, this amendment is a good start. And my last point is supporting this amendment will contribute to achieving the aims of both the old and new economic development strategy pending tonight, taking advantage of the subject land, strategic location and accessibility. Just to finish up, offices are already widespread and commonplace in the Wangara industrial area. These office businesses are complementary to industrial businesses and will fill up a vacant building that cannot be used for anything other than an office. It is consistent with the city's economic development strategy and facilitates the diversification of businesses within the city. Fellow councillors, your support for this local family business that is having a go has done the right thing and approached the city. Now is our time to do our part for the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. And that seconded Councillor Miles. Councillor Miles, you wish to speak to this item?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just to echo what Councillor Wright has indicated in his speech, I think when we heard Mr Hancock last week give his podium deputation, I think it was very clear that this actual part of the building has been vacant for about 6 years. I would suggest that, and I think Councillor Civic suggested it also, that this building's been there probably for almost 20 years. In this way, one shape, it was always there from what I remember as an office building. Because when you drove by it to go to other areas within Wanneroo. You was always there, and I think it was a real estate company, which I won't name because they're not here anymore. But I just think that whilst administration has had to write the report the way they have because it fits our town planning scheme, I think on this occasion, council are making the right decision to allow this particular building to be an office environment. There is quite a lot of parking that goes on that site. If you look at some of the near-map images going back almost 12 years, 15 years, there's always been a lot of cars being parked down the side alley and plenty of line markings on there. So they may not necessarily be out the direct front of this building, but they are running down the side of it. So I'm fully supportive of this alternate proposal tonight, and I ask council support it going forward. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Miles. Speakers for? Yes, Councillor Civic.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor, and in agreement with Councillor Miles, it goes back a lot further than 20 years. I go back to the beginnings of Wanneroo when it was zoned composite business light industrial, and under that discretionary zone, an office was permitted at the time. Since then, the zone has changed to service industry, where it is not permitted, I guess, or whether it's discretionary or not, I don't believe so. But in Wanneroo itself, there are a couple of business parks which have office accommodation. I'm in support of this, and the comments that was made by Mr Dixon last week that we possibly should look at this complete building as an office, because I think that was the intention that it was built for in the first place. In terms of Mr Hancock's business, in the recommendation, it does state that there are other areas in which this sort of business could go. But sometimes you want to be in the heart of where you want your business to be operational for its best benefits. And sometimes alternatives don't really work out. So I think in his case, he's chosen this, but it would have been better, I guess, if the use was cleared up in the early days. But I'm certainly happy with the additional use at this point in time, but I do want to make a point with regards to the new town planning schemes that we will be looking at, and I believe that administration should look at tidying up the discretionary uses so there's clarity in our scheme, and we can go forward and people know where they're going to go without having to come to council all the time and get things changed one way or another. But on this particular item, I'm quite happy to support this and possibly look at this building from an office perspective in Globo. So thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Civic. Speakers against? Speakers for? Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll be brief. I've done some research in respect to this matter, and I should add at the outset I endorse the comments of the Councillor Wright. What you're proposing, dear Councillors, just makes absolute common sense. But anyhow, I've done some research in relation to this property. It was strata title back in 1995. So the then town planning scheme would have been in place. I know that the report refers to, I think, admin conducting an historical real estate marketing history. Of course, the issue isn't what the premises were marketed as being suitable for use as or permitted to be, or could be permitted to be for use for, but the issue is what the actual permitted use was. And back in 95, my recollection is that if a use was permitted, then the applicant did not need, or the owner did not need to apply for a formal planning consent as such. And that leads me to another issue. I'm not really satisfied in any event that the historical use of this premises for office use breaches the relevant town planning scheme at the time that use was permitted. It may well be that this is a case of a valid pre-existing non-conforming use, which has ensued since 1995, and as with other, applications for planning consent, as they were called back in those days, the documents have disappeared or been archived or water damaged through water entering the former storage facility that the city leased in Cudell, I think it was. So in any event, as I've said, this makes common sense. I still believe that the city should have conducted a thorough pre-existing non-conforming valid use search to determine what planning consents, etc., had been issued in respect to these premises since day one. I believe that each of the units within this strata plan should perhaps be have the uses permitted changed to permit office use as a discretionary use in conjunction with the other existing permitted uses today. Beyond that, so once again, common sense. This is how the city can help the small business get ahead. Common sense. That's all it needs, common sense. Thank you. Well done, Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Councillor Baker. Speakers against?
Could I just do a point of clarification as well? I forgot to
Yes.
mention. The actual amendment goes beyond just the actual business. It goes through this site, the Strata site as well, because I know that was mentioned a couple of times.
Thank you for that clarification, Councillor Wright. Speakers for? Councillor Rowe.
Thanks, Mayor. And in addition to the questions I asked last week, I just want to make 2 extra observations. The first, as one of the ward councillors representing Wangara, I know Councillor Herridge wished she could have been here tonight to speak on this item and in support of the Hancocks, and I know the same would be for Councillor Newen as well. It's sort of separate but also connected. To Mr and Mrs Hancock, the deputation last week was fair, understanding and very respectful, and the phone call that you gave to, I'm assuming, a number of council members as well. So you have my respect and my support as well for this alternative. Good luck for your business.
Thank you, Councillor Rowe. Speakers against? Speakers for? Councillor Treby.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I congratulate Councillor Wright for his alternate recommendation. It was eloquently put and very well researched, so congratulations for that. I only have one comment to make, and I think it's probably fair to say that the Hancocks probably had no reason to believe it wasn't a conforming use because of the nature of the business. However, it does, and this is just a broad message to all who are seeking to start a business within anywhere, but certainly within Wangara, due diligence. Please doubly make sure that the office or the accommodation or the building or the planning suits the business you're looking at taking. I just wanted to underline that, not in this circumstance, because I think it's probably quite reasonable that there would have been an assumption that it would have been in place, but I think for anybody in the future, just a little bit of due diligence, I think, would have averted some angst and anxiety.
Thank you, Councillor Treby. Speakers against? Speakers for? Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I support the amendment based on the fact that this area of Wangara has a long-established office use, and as administration itself has acknowledged, will have a negligible impact on the surrounding amenity and function of the area. I note and support the WAPC's concern with regards to the city's scheme needing a more strategic approach, and I do believe this amendment has addressed that concern. Once submitted to the WAPC and EPA for their consideration, I look forward to the amendment number 203 to District Planning Scheme number 2 coming to fruition and giving more clarification for others in the future. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Parker. Speakers against? Speakers for? Councillor Coetzee.
I have to say something. I actually called Councillor Miles last week to find out, is somebody doing something about this? Because something needs to be done. So then Councillor Miles told me that Councillor Wright is doing something, so thank you. I also would like to say thank you for your honesty that you came forward and brought this forward, and I actually enjoyed the phone call I had with you as well. Best of luck with your business. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Coetzee. Speakers against? Speakers for? Councillors putting the alternative recommendation, if you could please cast your vote. And that is unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Wright. So you're very welcome to stay for the rest of the council meeting, but we fully understand if you want to leave. Thank you. Okay, what was that? PSO2? PSO3 now? Yep. PSO3, can I please have a mover and seconder for PSO3? Thank you, Councillor Miles. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Kitsia. Councillor Miles, you wish to speak to this item? Councillor Kitsia. Speakers for? Against? If you could please cast your vote. Councillor Baker and Councillor Huntley, if you could please cast your vote. Oh, Councillor Baker's left the council chambers. Well, that's carried, thank you. PSO4 we have done. Can I please have a mover and seconder for PSO5? Thank you, Councillor Treby. Seconded, Councillor Miles. Councillor Treby, you wish to speak to this item?
No, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Miles?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. This item's come back to council. It was unfortunate because the Department of Environment have given our administration quite a hard time before they would allow this to go out for advertising. I was looking for the right word there. The proponent, unfortunately, has been waiting quite a bit of time before he's been able to proceed with this application. It has cost him quite a bit of money. I understand that administration are going to seek some further clarification with regard to the environmental, I think the Department of DWER, I think it's called, because they are clearly overreaching on what they're requesting from some of our applications. This is the second one that we've had an issue with in council. The administration brought this back to council very, very quickly. So our proponent and our client and our resident is not going to be put out any longer than they've already been put out. This should have been on advertising at least 8 weeks ago. And then I know that the director, Mr Dixon, and his team are going to then work with the WA Planning Commission to find out what has changed within the Department of Environment as to why they are now sort of starting to hum and ha at some of these amendments that are coming through. But I would ask all council to endorse this one here tonight so the proponent can advertise it straight away. Thank you.
Thank you. Speakers for? Speakers against? Putting the recommendation PSO5, if you could please cast your vote. I declare that carried. 12. I'm noting Councillor Baker's not in the room. Thank you. We have no reports for assets. Community and place, CP01, Councillor Parker. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Berry. Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. To say that I approve of administration's recommendation is an understatement. I cannot speak more highly about this amazing group of individuals, and thank you, Mrs. Terreling, for including some of the testimonials from schools that have participated in one or more of the diverse, targeted range of programs the Constable Care Foundation offers. I was invited to attend the culmination performance of a 10-week Youth Choices intensive program offered by Constable Care. This program, as is reflected in our agenda, but I will highlight, it is designed to creatively explore relevant social concerns in young people aged 12 to 17, and then empower them to identify strategies to assist them in making better decisions which affect themselves, their families, and in turn the wider community. I won't be specific, but will share with councillors 3 deeply concerning issues I heard addressed by the students involved in the program. This group consisted of 15 and 16-year-olds. Some students are not just working for spending money, they are having to work to help pay the bills. These young people have to be included as part of the equation in the financial constraints, responsibilities, and worries of running the day-to-day finances in their home. At the same time, they are dealing with challenges that I have never faced and ensured, thank God, that my children were never faced with. It is not possible to join sporting teams or attend community groups. For amongst other reasons, a lack of funds, no transport to practice or games, having to take care of younger siblings while parents are still at work, or sadly, no support or encouragement from parents that are just too tired or fail to care. Sadly, the list went on. Drugs featured as a key issue in this age group, and shockingly younger. Young people, and please allow me to emphasize this, these young people in front of me were being recruited to sell drugs as easy money by their own peers. Frighteningly, this recruitment then develops into the addiction of those same young people, which is the intent. What a terrifying cycle. After the program concluded, I and 3 members of the city's community development group had the opportunity to speak to teachers from the school and members of the Constable Care program. Both myself and the team from the city were shocked to find out that this group was representative of 70% of the students at that school. I am passionate about supporting this group for the benefits it offers our community and, more importantly, young people who don't and cannot support themselves. The city's strategic intent to foster safe and resilient communities is vital, and the city's approach to proactively and in partnership with these stakeholders is imperative. I cannot thank the city's community development team enough for the wonderful work they do and urge all councillors to do the same by approving this recommendation. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Parker. Councillor Berry.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I too totally support this programme. I think it's absolutely wonderful for the young children and young adults that are within this programme. I think Councillor Parker's captured brilliantly what they do. Without this, drugs and alcohol cycles would not be broken, education wouldn't be given, and the vicious cycle continues. This programme also aids mental health, and I fully support it as well, and I'd urge everybody else to support. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Berry. Speakers for? Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Mayor. I think Councillor Parker and Councillor Berry really captured what that program does for young people. And I know back when I was in primary school, this was one of the programs that I went through. And obviously I remember the puppet show. And it's really good to see that the city has obviously continued with supporting the program. And obviously this is really good for bang for your buck for residents. Because investment in youth is the future generation that are going to be living in this city and buying houses. And obviously you want to set the precedent right for young people, and you also want to have an organisation that can sort of adapt and build and have a flexible model to be able to change. And like Councillor Parker said, the issues change over time. I certainly, when I was there, drugs wasn't a bigger issue than it is today. And it really tackles those real world issues that young people are facing at the moment. So I urge councillors to support this. It's a great investment for youth and also for our city. Thank you.
Thank you. Speakers against? Speakers for? Councillor Civic.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Not really a lot more to add other than to say I think at one stage the city, the dynamics were different with constable care and the city wasn't supporting them. But with the issues that the youth are really experiencing these days, I think it's very important to have this program to get these kids on the straight and narrow again and getting their thinking right, because there are a lot of mental issues out there with young children. And I just believe that this program, guided by the police department through constable care, is a great way of saying we care for our youth. Thank you.
Thank you. Speakers against? Speakers for? Councillor Treby.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to make one point, because there are inevitably people out there who may be concerned that the city's investing funds into programs such as this. And I would put it to anyone who wants to prosecute that argument. They're usually the people who are concerned about increasing and rising rates of crime and antisocial behaviour and vandalism. And you can't deal with those problems unless you look at the front end in terms of intervention. So whenever anyone looks at why the city invests in programs such as this, it's because you have to have that longitudinal approach to make sure that you deal with crime, violence, vandalism, and those sorts of things, all wrapped into drugs, of course, at the front end. And this is one of those processes. Great program, well worth the investment, because this does reap rewards, and those facts have been proven.
Thank you, Councillor Treby. Speakers against? Speakers for? Thank you, Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll be very brief. Just one point, and that is this. It's the obvious point, I suppose, but the Constable Care Foundation is a charitable organisation. It is a not-for-profit organisation by definition. It is registered under the Charitable Collections Act of the state. It also has approved donee status in terms of donations to this charity being tax deductible. That's all we need to know, I think. And its objectives over the years have certainly expanded as society has evolved, in inverted commas, whatever that means, for better or for worse. Naturally enough, of course, its objectives have changed through time. Obviously, the amount being proposed by funding, it's around 100,000 over, say, 3 years. There are just over 100,000. But I think it's money well spent. And it's generally speaking, I think it requires unanimous support, in my view, because of the objectives that it seeks to achieve. In this day and age, life is far more complicated for young people than it was back in the 60s and 70s. As I say, the 60s gave us our freedom, the 70s gave us absolute freedom and enjoyment of the freedom, and then the 80s onwards then started restricting freedoms again, but that's the way it is in this life cycle. You're a great charity, and yes, the recommendation, of course, is overwhelming merit. Thank you.
Thank you. Speakers against? Speakers for? Councillor Rowe.
Thanks, Mayor. And I do remember when I was at primary school having exposure to this foundation as well. Just two observations, and I think Councillor Wright will echo me on this one. As a member of the youth, not only are we dealing now with more of a cyber safety issue, particularly with online bullying, but we've also got the additional challenges of the pandemic as well. As a member of youth, I know it can lead to questions about belonging, career, ambition, everything like that. So I know that this particular program might not address that, but I know the foundation as a larger organisation does do a lot of work for the youth, and it does have both a practical and a substantive impact. And I think that it should continue long into the future, as well as this partnership.
Thank you, Councillor Rowe. Speakers against? Speakers for? There is no speakers against. Councillor Parker, so you don't need to do the right of reply. So councillors are putting the recommendation CP01. If you could please cast your vote. That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to Corporate Strategy and Performance, CS01. Can I please have a mover and seconder for CS01? Thank you, Councillor Baker. Thank you, Councillor Civic. Wish to speak to this item? No. Speakers against? No. Putting the recommendation CSO1, if you could please cast your vote. Declare that carried unanimously. Thank you. CSO2, can I please have a mover for CSO2? Thank you, Councillor Rowe. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Berry. Councillor Rowe, you wish to speak to this item? Councillor Berry? You do, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to thank administration because I realise the warrant of payments attracts many, many questions. And I'd just like to thank Nolene and her team for giving us additional information and providing it in such a timely manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Berry. The speakers against?
Question, Madam Mayor? Just for the heck of it. Sorry, I have a question. Sorry, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Baker.
Yes, it relates to the Cat Haven. The entry is on page 195 of the agenda. It's item number 2214, Cat Welfare Society Incorporated, $6,627.50. At the briefing session, I asked a question as to what was the duration of the funding, how is it comprised, etc. And the response that I received, which is circulated in matters, the document notice or titled as Matters Arising from Council Members' Briefing Session, said as follows: Cat Welfare Society Inc. The payment covers a 3-month period from December 2021 to February 2022 and relates to 52 cats that were held from between 3 to 7 days at the Cat Haven. If the cat owners were able to be located and the cat is returned and the owner has to pay. Just a question to Ms Terrylink. Can I infer from that that if the cat owner can't be located, the cat is then sold, so to speak, or euthanized, please?
Thank you, Councillor Baker. Mrs Terrelink?
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor. So what would happen there is that the cat is effectively donated to the Cat Haven and they make arrangements for rehoming. It would only be if the cat was extremely sick or something like that that they may consider alternatives, but their policy is certainly to rehome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Speakers against? Speakers for? Councillor Baker?
Thanks. I'll be very brief, Madam Mayor. Yes, in relation to organisations of this kind, they do perform a very important role, believe it or not, for elderly members of the community. And I remember when my late mother accessed...
Sorry, Councillor Baker, we're actually speaking about the warrant of payments.
Yes, well, I'm speaking in support of the motion that the warrant of payments be adopted. And
So
I'm
you're
speaking about
singling that particular item out just to make comment?
I beg your pardon?
You're singling that item out just to make comment for the warrant of payments?
Well, I'm speaking in support of the warrant of payments, but in particular this particular item, which has considerable merit. And I'm explaining why, amongst other things, I will be voting in support of the acceptance of the warrants of payments. I can speak more generally if you like, but I'm speaking specifically regarding this.
Thank you.
If that's not permitted, Madam Mayor, so be it.
No, if you specifically wish to speak about that, it's unusual, but I'm happy to allow.
Oh, thanks. I'll be very brief. Anyhow, as Ms Terrelink said, the cats that aren't returned to their true and rightful owner, in many cases it's difficult to prove who owns them, of course, particularly if they're not registered. In terms of those that aren't, they are in effect surrendered to the Cat Welfare Society Inc., and they can actually be rehomed to prospective cat owners who are interested in acquiring cats. I shouldn't use that term, but my understanding is that there's no such thing as a free cat when you purchase it from a Cat Welfare Society. My own family experienced this issue many years ago when their then last cat passed away. It was necessary to purchase, or I should say, that's a terrible term, acquire, so to speak, another substitute cat. I know that my father was quite flat following the death of his then last cat, and my mother set me off on, in the car to go and find the Welfare Society and to acquire a cat. And it wasn't a simple process. Anyhow, to cut a long story short, it was portrayed as being a case where the cat would be given away free or freely with no charge. But with all the add-ons, I think it cost me, what, $300 and something to acquire this cat and take it home. And I'm not being critical of the fee that was charged, obviously, and it's not the purchase price for the sale of a cat. It's more a case where that fee is used as a contribution towards the care of the cat and also, where appropriate, veterinary fees and also inoculations and the like. So, yes, it's a very worthy cause. Cats, of course, are, well, they are, well, not a man's best friend, but a man's second best friend, I think it's fair to say. And yes, so a very worthy payment and worthy sponsorship of this important local organisation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Baker. Are there any further speakers for the warrant of payments? Speakers against? I'm putting the recommendation CS02, warrant of payments. If you could please cast your votes. Thank you. Declare that carried unanimously. CS03, can I please have a mover and seconder for CS03? Thank you, Councillor Rowe. Thank you, Councillor Treby. Councillor Rowe, you wish to speak to this item?
No, thanks, Mayor.
Councillor Treby?
No, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Speakers for? Speakers against? Putting recommendation CS03, if you could please cast your vote. I declare that carried unanimously. Thank you. CS04 we have done. CS05, turning to page 259. So we're looking for a delegate to the Heritage Service Advisory Group. And I believe we've got two nominations, Councillor Parker and Councillor Wright. Are there any further nominations? No? Right, so it says in the report on page 260, under comment, that council is requested to consider the appointment of a council member delegate as detailed in the report. Where there are more nominations than the available vacancy for representation, a vote by a show of hands will be conducted. So I'm going to, so obviously we only can vote once. So I'm going to, we've got the two nominations. The first one that's appearing on my list is Councillor Glynis Parker. Can I please have a show of hands for Councillor Parker to be the delegate? Show of hands, it's indicated in the report. 7. Okay, and if I can have a show of hands for Councillor Wright.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
That's 6, thank you. So I declare Councillor Parker as the delegate to the Heritage Services Advisory Group. So that's been conducted by vote. If we could please accept that as the recommendation, thank you. If you could please cast your vote. Oh, missed. That's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Moving on to the CEO report, CEO1, and we have 2 reports for CEO1. So the first amendment we have is moved Councillor Miles. And Councillor Miles, you have a seconder?
Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Councillor Baker. Okay, and then we have the other amendment to get these on the table before you do the substantive. So Councillor Sangali, do you have a seconder? Councillor Parker, thank you. So we have the CEO1, which now has 2 amendments. Can I please have a mover and seconder for the substantive recommendation? Okay, thank you, Councillor Treby. And Councillor Civic. Councillor Treby, you wish to speak to this item?
I reserve my right.
Thank you. Councillor Civic.
Same, Madam Mayor, thank you.
Thank you. That's been moved and seconded. So we have the 2 amendments. The first one, Councillor Miles. So Councillor Miles, if you would like to speak to your amendment.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, councillors. There was 2 items that I spoke on last week. One was the oddity of the regulation and the Act that allows any human being within the world to be able to put a complaint in against a councillor. And whilst we're unable to make any changes to that, part of the because it's a regulation and it's a law in the Act. What I did ask administration, if it was possible, was just to broaden out the wording that anybody that puts in a complaint understands that they obviously need to be doing that in good faith. It's just about adding not just a councillor who puts a complaint in against another councillor, which was there to say as in good faith. This is going to add that any complaint understands that they have to access it in good faith. And, that is probably more self-explanatory, just to tidy that component up. The second part of my amendment was what I spoke about last week, requesting that the CEO write to Walga Direct and ask Walga to seek some senior counsel, legal counsel, to the legalities of the Act, whether it is valid, and it does provide by, as my note is saying, that it actually does have equal fairness and natural justice. Natural justice does fail in this one because, as we know, that when an item comes to council, and council decides one way or another, there is no right of appeal. And it doesn't matter whether it's a small issue or a large issue that comes to council. As a natural justice, we know that everybody has a right at some point to appeal a decision that may be made against them. So I don't want this council to expend large funds of money for a senior council to have a look at those legalities, but the suggestion was for our CEO to write to Walga and get Walga to do it on behalf of all of the local councils within the state, because they're all struggling with this as well. They're all getting some very hefty costs incurred because of the investigations that are being done, and I would just like to see that the senior council be sought, and then obviously given back to the local governments to actually see whether or not there is anything in there that is clearly not making the whole process legal. So I do ask for your support on that. It's just something that we would do and waste our own taxpayers' money, but I would ask that Walga do it on our behalf. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Miles. Councillor Baker?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. To speak with support again. Once again, this agenda item relates to the proposed amended council member, committee member and candidate code of conduct complaints handling policy. This is not dealing with the code. You need to understand the difference. It's all very well and good to have the code, of course, but the question is, well, what is the procedure? What is the policy procedure? And of course, this document sets out that procedure. And the procedure is very clear in its terms, in my view, but the point is this, it smacks of denying several key principles of procedural fairness and natural justice. The most obvious one is that the complainant doesn't even have to reside in Australia or Western Australia. The other is that a person can make a complaint on behalf of another person without that other person even knowing that a complaint has been made in name and without their written authority. And more bizarrely, in those circumstances, if the councillor concerned is required to make an apology and sends an apology to the person who didn't know that a complaint had been lodged in their name, they would say, well, what are you apologising to me for? I didn't make a complaint. I had no objection at all with what you said or did or what have you. Bizarre. The other thing is that the procedure is very clear in terms of what should happen at the meeting at which at least a Division 3 complaint is adjudicated upon by the council members. I've already laboured on this so many times, but it stands to reason. You cannot be a judge or juror, prosecutor, and also, in effect, vote in support of your innocence or guilt if you're an accused person, to use the broad terms. That is just contrary to all principles of procedural fairness and natural justice. Hence, why it is that, for that reason alone, this legal opinion is necessary. And just for the record, I know that probably many of you won't listen to me on this point, but I'll make it for the record because I'll be on the record. The law is very clear. If a piece of legislation, be it an act or regulations, if they purport to wholly or partially exclude the principles of procedural fairness and natural justice, then within the body or text of the relevant regulation or section in the Act, the legislature must use clear words such as, generally, the principles of procedural fairness and natural justice shall not apply to this complaints handling procedure. Now, this is just the procedure. We're required by the code, by the regs to introduce a code of conduct. We're dealing with the complaints handling procedure. The status of the procedure sets out what appears to be a mandatory procedure. Words such as must, shall, must, shall. That doesn't mean, for example, if you feel like it, you do something, or if you don't feel like it, you don't have to. Must and shall are mandatory words. You have to follow the procedure. And without going into detail, and without being specific, I'm sure many members can think of many scenarios historically where perhaps, I'll withdraw that actually, it's possible to simply ignore the procedure if one wanted to, and there's no penalty for ignoring the procedure. Not at all. Not at all. Absolutely none. None whatsoever. What's the point in having the procedure? It purports to be mandatory. We're told it's law, but it's not law as such. It's a policy and a procedure. It's not law as such. What's the point in having a policy and a procedure if, when you feel like it, you can just completely ignore it? Or moreover, completely ignore the fundamental tenets and principles of the procedure. This definitely does warrant a legal advice. The city shouldn't have to fund it itself. Walga's supposed to be representing us, and all local governments, they can foot the bill. They can seek advice from senior council regarding all aspects of not just Division 3 complaints, but all complaints, be it, well, perhaps Division 3 and 4, more so Division 3 because they come before councils, all aspects of the Division 3 complaint system insofar as it relates to, once again, the subject matter of this agenda, namely the council member, committee member and candidate code of conduct complaints handling policy. Very important. It's time that we look at this. Other councils have raised similar issues historically since these sorts of policies were first introduced. There are concerns about the lack of fairness, the lack of openness and accountability, the lack of the right of reply, except in relation to penalty, the fact that, once again, any person can bring a complaint on behalf of any other person, even if that other person doesn't even know someone's complaining on their behalf. There has to be some sort of an authority signed by the principal complainant for the sub-complainant to complain on behalf of the principal complainant. Otherwise, it just makes a mockery of the whole system. a mockery. And the bottom line is that, this is the bottom line, when council adjudicates upon Division 3 complaints, Division 3 Code of Conduct complaints, we are performing a quasi-judicial function. And for those newer members, of course, I'd urge you to read your training modules regarding the council when making quasi-judicial functions. And as the name indicates, when making a quasi-judicial function, you should afford any person who's likely to be affected by the outcome of that function or the decision following the outcome of that function, you're required to accord the principles of procedural fairness and natural justice. And as we're told repeatedly in many instances as well, we should also adhere to the State Ombudsman's guidelines for adjudicating upon complaints in respect of state government departments and agencies. So I think it is high time for Welga to step in our shoes and do this on our behalf and behalf of all the councils in Western Australia, so that we can get council's advice, definitive advice, which advice Welga can then refer to the Minister of Local Government to then, if you like, amend any relevant regulations that need to be amended, and that's arguable in itself, to ensure that that Division 3 complaints are adjudicated upon in a fair, just and equitable manner. I'd urge my fellow elected members to support this legal opinion being commissioned from Welga, and of course Welga will foot the bill, obviously. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question for Mrs. Jennings. Mrs. Jennings, as the complaints officer, can you confirm that due process has been followed correctly and clearly within the policy? And also, can you also confirm that elected members have followed due process clearly and correctly in line with the policy?
Thank you, Mayor. This policy has been the only thing that we've used in all of the meetings that have seen complaints come to the council, and we have followed that policy precisely.
Thank you, Mrs. Jennings. So we've had a mover and seconder for an amendment. Speakers for? Speakers against? Councillor Baker?
Just going to ask a question, sorry, Madam Mayor.
Well, I'm just going to go to the against and then I'll have the question. Thank you. Councillor Treby?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. For a couple of reasons, I cannot support this. On the suggestion that any complainant, because I understand the discussion and the debate, and I think there would have been some worthy effort going to the Interpretations Act as to the definitions of, persons, either individuals or multiple, and then extrapolating that. I think the Interpretations Act would have dealt with that equally. So two things. Number one, I think anyone who would make a complaint would have to have a material standing in the matter itself, firstly. And then secondly, I don't think there's a capacity for the city to compel a complainant to lodge a complaint in good faith and for a proper purpose. They're duties that are owed by certainly elected members, and I absolutely understand that and certainly support that. But you cannot compel anybody in a legal sense to ensure that they act in good faith and for a proper purpose. I don't know how we would have legal capacity to do that. But firstly, and secondly, the second recommendation speaks about petitioning Welga and spending their money to seek formal legal advice from senior counsel as to the validity of Division 3 provisions. Now, the Division 3 provisions, of course, before it gets to Parliament, councillors, you should all know it goes through a parliamentary council process before and when the law is written, before it gets debated in state parliament. So it's gone through that process. There is a great difference between its legality and the unintended consequences of its implementation. I don't know the outcome is going to tell us anything about it not being lawful. There's obviously some significant doubt about its implementation and how it's being used. So from that process, I don't know that it's going to have any response coming back other than to say, yes, it's lawful, and it's gone through Parliament, it's received royal ascension, end of story. That's fine. And thirdly, I think it's also important to understand there's a couple of documents. Number one is the processes involved with the Commonwealth Attorney General and the Attorney General's Department. As to document number one is the Administrative Law Policy and Guidelines, and they refer specifically to another section or another group within the Attorney General's Department, which is the Administrative Review Council, and they put out best practice guidelines, and both refer to each other, and there are 5 elements on guidelines, and as far as I'm concerned, we follow these 5 elements, and they are, it's decision-making guidelines, that they must be lawful, you must demonstrate natural justice, decisions must be based on facts, findings and evidence, you must provide reasons, and you must be accountable for those reasons. So I get the sentiment, but number one, I don't think we don't have the ability to compel people or a person or persons to act in good faith and for a proper purpose. We don't have that capacity or ability. And number two, the lawfulness of the Division 3 has already gone through the parliamentary process, and it is law. As to whether or not its implementation could be done better, that's a separate issue. So I don't think there's an issue with natural justice procedural fairness, only in its interpretation and its delivery and its implementation. So on the basis of that, I don't think there's going to be any satisfaction to those concerns on the basis of what I'm reading in front of me. Certainly, number two, the recommendation itself doesn't match what the debate has been.
Thank you, Councillor Treby. I might just ask Kate if you got any comments on that, Kate.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. No particular comments unless there's a specific question or issue that you'd like me to address.
Thank you. Speakers for. Councillor Baker, you'll have your question, Councillor Baker.
Yes, please. Question addressed to either Kate or to Nolene. Are either of you aware that many laws that have been passed by state and federal parliaments and vetted beforehand by their respective parliamentary councils, in many instances it can be a team of 5 laws, that many laws have been held as being ultra vires by courts of superior jurisdiction, such as the Supreme Court, Full Court of Supreme Court WA, the Full Court of the Federal Court and the High Court of Australia. In other words, just because a piece of legislation has been vetted by Parliamentary Council doesn't mean that it is watertight and valid. And number two, are you aware that the complaints handling policy itself is not been vetted by Parliamentary Council or by either house of our state Parliament, please?
Point of order. A point of clarification, please, Madam Mayor.
Yes, point of clarification, Councillor Treby.
Point of clarification. It's very difficult for me to respond to that because there's been a general comment following up and in a very broad sense talking about some amorphous laws that have held to be ultra vires without providing any evidence or any circumstance or any particular law as evidence to back that comment up.
Thank you for that clarification, Councillor Treby. And Kate, in relation to the question.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. Look, I am aware that from time to time laws may be found to be ultra vires. This policy is intended to facilitate a procedure, a transparent procedure that's capable of being reviewed by this council on a periodic basis to align with the expectations of as outlined in both the regulations, the guidelines that support those regulations, and information from the Department of Local Government. I don't really have much more to comment there unless I've missed a relevant part of Councillor Baker's question.
Thank you. Speakers for? Speakers against? Okay, so councillors, we've got Councillor Miles in moving the amendment. You wish to have a right of reply?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of points, councillors. The wording of acting in good faith and proper is already in our policy. The only part of the item 1 that I'm wanting us to change is the fact that any complainant understands that when they access the policy that they act in a good faith and proper purpose. Now, we are not a prosecution agency anyway. We do not investigate a complaint. We ask people, whether you're a councillor only in this case, that a complaint is done in good faith and proper purpose. I'm just asking council to insert the words, any complaint understands that when they access the complaint policy, that they act in good, proper faith and purpose. And I think that's only just a request. We can only ask people to act in good faith and proper purpose. No other person that's acting in putting in any other complaint can be prosecuted if it's a malicious complaint anyway. It's just fact. I mean, you can have somebody put in a complaint every week if you wish, because somebody doesn't like the way you talk or somebody doesn't like the way you look. But that doesn't mean to say that we can take that complaint and say, oh, well, we're not going to deal with it because we don't think that you're doing anything good faith and proper purpose. But I would like to just insert it, councillors, so people, when they read that, they understand that we want them to act in good faith and proper purpose. Now, moving on to the second item, it is just asking our CEO to write on behalf of us to WALGA, who is our peak body, governing body as a local council, to seek some senior legal advice on whether or not the provisions of Division 3 have all that is proper for local governments. That's all it is. They will seek the advice and they will come back that there is nothing there. It's nothing more than that. I don't want our council to be expending the funds on behalf of ratepayers on this issue. And there are, the Parliamentary Council that write legislation are excellent people. I know some of them, but mistakes happen. Members of Parliament insert things into acts that are not correct, and they sometimes still go all the way through to the gatekeeper, and regulations get made. That's why we have a court system to back up us, the people, against Parliament. And that's why I would like to seek your approval to write on behalf, or the CEO to write on behalf to WALGA, asking for some legal advice with and around the validity of Division 3 and its provisions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Miles. And if we have this item up on the screen, this amendment, bearing in mind we have got another amendment. This is the first amendment. Okay, if I could please ask you to cast your vote. That's carried. Thank you. And then that goes to the right. So the names of against is Councillor Treby, Councillor Civic, Councillor Huntley, and myself. And the next amendment is Councillor Sangali, and seconded Councillor Parker. So Councillor Sangali.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mine is a very simple one. It's just to add into the actual complaints handling policy as it is, that under sorry, I haven't got my glasses on. 5.11, the city will maintain a confidential register of the complaints lodged under the code. The reason that I have asked for that to be included is because I feel that if it doesn't remain confidential, as the report is, as the meeting is, all of that is confidential. But if we have a register at the end, it might actually preclude members of the community from wanting to actually pursue a complaint in the first place if they think that their name is actually going to be attached to some sort of complaint and then it's becoming public material.
Thank you, Councillor Sangali. Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Happy to second. And thank you, Councillor Sangali, for the amendment. Absolutely support confidentiality for both the cities and complainant safety and security. Thanks, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Parker. Speakers for? Yes, Councillor Wright.
I just got a question, if that's okay.
Yes, Councillor Wright.
Just in regards to confidentiality, if a member of public decides to talk about a complaint, then what are the actions, I guess, for council, because then that confidentiality is breached? So what happens then for the councillor that is in question if a member of the public lodges a complaint and that is released, I guess?
Kate?
Sorry, through you, Madam Mayor. I thought there was a follow-up question. There's not a specific consequence for members of the public who breach the confidentiality. They're made aware, so complainants and all parties to the policy are made aware of their confidentiality obligations. Obviously, once they go behind closed doors, there's different confidentiality obligations for elected members. In terms of pursuing a breach of that confidence, it's not something contemplated in the policy or the regulations.
Okay.
And it's largely because of the level of the nature and intent of the complaints, but
Thank you.
Question, Madam Mayor?
Yes, Councillor Baker.
To Kate. Kate, in that hypothetical factual scenario referred to a few minutes ago, if a member of the public fully discloses in its entirety a copy of a confidential complaint, which has been accepted by the complaints officer, now then I assume that the complaint will have to be, first of all, accepted, of course, before it attacks confidentiality. If that person then discloses that to the public, and that becomes the subject of, for example, a newspaper article circulated in an additional West Australian newspaper, won't the confidentiality of that complaint have therefore been lost because the issue would have been in the public domain, and hence confidentiality would no longer apply, even though we could still pretend it's confidential? The legal truth is that it would not be confidential because it's in the public domain and is therefore not by definition confidential, please. What's your answer to that question, please?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. I guess that's a hypothetical that I haven't turned my mind to. I can't really answer that in the context. It would depend on the situation.
Thank you, Kate.
Another question, Madam Mayor?
Yes, Councillor Baker.
I'm not sure whether to address this to Councillor Sangali or to Nolene or Kate, but I understand where Councillor Sangali is coming from. But the question is this: in terms of the register of complaints, given that the city's complaints officer, in the first instance, accepts complaints by way of Division 3 complaints and Division 4 complaints, is it intended that both categories of complaints will be entered into the register and remain confidential, particularly in circumstances where some Division 4 complaints are appealed against or a review sought against the panel's findings, and they go to the SAT, and hence they become so that would override the confidentiality. But yeah, I've no objections at all to what's being proposed here. But I'm just coming up with some situations where it won't work. In other words, the confidentiality will be lost. But yeah, I support this motion, and you can treat that as
Thank you. I'll take that as a speaking in favour. Thank you, Councillor Baker. Speakers against? Councillor Miles.
More a question. I don't have a problem with what Councillor Sangali is attempting or asking Council to do. And I guess this is a question I have CEO or to Kate Ostenhoff. I might have got it right. If an FOI application is put forward, obviously that act is reasonably powerful. Can those complaints be then get through the FOI process?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. it depends, but because it relates to personal information, the identity of someone wouldn't be disclosed unless we had their consent.
Yep. Thank you. Speakers against? Speakers for? No. So, Councillor Sangal, you wish to do the right of reply?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I guess just to follow up with the comments, if a breach of confidentiality was to happen through the member of a public for lodging a complaint, then that is purely on them. I don't see why the city should be actually publishing somebody's name if they are wanting it to remain confidential. It's not up to us to put it out there in the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sangali. So putting the recommendation, the amendment, all those in favour or against, if you could please cast your vote. That's carried unanimously. Thank you. So moving through to this substantive report, which has been amended with the 2 amendments. That was originally moved by Councillor Treby, seconded by Councillor Civic. So putting the amended complaint handling policy, if I could please ask you to cast your votes. That's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Councillors, I just need to go back to the appointment delegate to Heritage Services because we had a show of hands. And obviously now we're with the electronic voting. I had made a note that the mover was Councillor Treby and seconded Councillor Sangali because another hands went up. Just checking that is that correct? Yes, thank you. So I just wanted to double clarify that, Councillor Sangali, that was the delegate to Heritage Services because we had hands up. So thank you. We'll adjust that for the record. Moving through to CEO2, the Draft Economic Development Strategy. I'm certainly happy to move this and seconded by Councillor Treby. The Draft Economic Development Strategy 2022-2032, which is 10 years ahead. One of the things that Mr. Steve Marmion and his team can most certainly always be relied upon is to deliver good quality documentation which provides good information. This has also been through to the BTAG, Business and Tourism Advisory Group, as a group of people on that advisory group that are very informed and have helped put this together. This document will now be submitted for public consultation for a period of 28 days. We are sophisticated in our approach for economic development with the City of Wanneroo. We are in very good hands with our team. And I would like to say a very big thank you to Mr. Steve Marmion and your team for what you do and the due diligence and understanding of who we are as an organisation with our challenges and our opportunities. So if you could please convey our thanks to your team and obviously yourself, and we look forward to the consultation. It comes back in 28 days. Thank you. Councillor Treby.
Just briefly, adding to your comments, Madam Mayor, the opportunities for Wanneroo in the future, both the near term and the long term, are very, very fertile. We will be housing and be home to the technologies of the future. And Steve, if I'm getting this correctly, I think it's the automation and robotics facility. I don't want to go and get labelled on the other word that I was using. But certainly congratulations to the team, Mr. Marmion. But this does set down a guide, a plan for the future to roll out in Wanneroo, and they will be technologies of the future. And having a plan that allows us to to lobby, to discuss, to present to the many decision makers, not only regionally or within the state, but certainly also nationally, gives us an opportunity to attract the funding and the investment that we could possibly see coming into Wanneroo. And further, I think with this sort of a document, there's an opportunity to attract international investment. Madam Mayor, absolutely submit this to Council and seek your support.
Thank you very much, Councillor Treby, and I've just been provided with a document for a declaration of interest, so that's Councillor Wright, if you'd like to read your declaration of interest. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. With regard to item CEO20422, Draft Economic Development Strategy 2022 to 2032, I disclose that I'm a fee-paying member for the Wanneroo Business Association, and as a consequence there may be a perception that my impartiality on the matter may be affected. I declare that I'll consider this matter on its merits and vote accordingly. May I also speak in favour of the item?
Yes, absolutely, Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to congratulate Mr Marmion's team for the tremendous work they have done in the economic development and tourism space. This report was done in-house using minimal resources and is a fantastic result for other departments within the city to follow suit, saving lots of costs for the ratepayer. As Deputy Chair of the Business and Tourism Advisory Group, I know this report accurately represents the interests of businesses and future opportunities that the City of Wanneroo have within the region. It is great to see the city think outside the box, and for me, some of the highlights, which I strongly advocated for, were including an agricultural tourism precinct in North Wanneroo, which will support our farmers, provide educational opportunities for people to learn about the City of Wanneroo roots and history, and also around the agriculture sector, and provide a niche market for tourism in WA. The second point is the Nearabut Waste Precinct, and is an area that I've grown an interest in starting council, and obviously having a facility that would save our rubbish trucks from driving to Bibra Lake, and also using other facilities is a bonus and a more sustainable option. And the third and last point is, now that this is a massive one for me, but expanding accommodation offerings in investment in the city citywide to bring hotels, ecotourism offerings, caravan parks, resorts and other unique accommodations to complete the tourism cycle of stay, eat and play and work, as we have the lowest accommodation offering of any local government in the state. Mayor and councillors, this is a document we can be proud of, and that will bring in more investment into our city and provide our residents and ratepayers more opportunities within our local region, with tourism at the forefront of what we do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Speakers against? Speakers for? Councillor Aitken.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to make a declaration with regard to item CE02-422, and I disclose that my husband and my business are members of the Wanneroo Business Association. As a consequence, there may be a perception that my impartiality on the matter may be affected, and I declare that I will consider this matter on its merits and vote accordingly. Steve, Mr Marmion, this is a fantastic report. Thank you so much for all of the effort that you and your team have put into it, and I'm very, very happy to support it, and thank you for bringing it to council.
Thank you, Councillor Aitken. Speakers against? Speakers for? Councillor Parker and then Councillor Huntley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you to administration for the highly informative review and draft of the economic development strategy. Certainly, as pointed out, the city and world have experienced change and are having to rethink and adapt to a post-COVID world. Refocusing on the 6 key areas that are vital to the City of Wanneroo's future growth and sustainability has certainly been addressed in the strategy and absolutely fulfills the city's vision of a welcoming community connected through local opportunities. Well done, and to everyone concerned. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Parker. Speakers against? And Councillor Huntley speaking for.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I also would like to make a declaration. I'm also a member of the Wanneroo Business Association, and as a consequence, there may be a perception that my impartiality on the matter may be affected, and I'm also the chairman of the Business and Tourism Advisory Group, so it probably is actually a bit of a perception that I'm going to like this more than anything else. This is a fantastic document. This will take Wanneroo forward into the future and put hopefully our business and our tourism at the forefront of what we're going to be doing in the future. The economic development strategy is something that we can all be proud of, and this will bring jobs to Wanneroo. We can't grow cities if we don't have any jobs, And this certainly is the first phase of that. And for this to go out for public consultation, I do hope the public and the businesses will absolutely get behind this and bring us some comments, because without those comments, without that feedback, we can't go forward. It is so important that that we acknowledge the hard work that has gone into this, and also a document that has been produced in-house. This has been produced with our own stuff. We haven't sent this out for someone to do a glossy brochure or whatever. This has been produced in-house. It is really cost effective for the city, and I hope that we see so much more of this in the future. Well done, Steve and his team. Cannot congratulate you more. This document is a masterpiece. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Huntley. Speakers against? Speakers for? Councillor Civic.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I like other speaking councillors for this. I'm pleased that we have this vision for 10 years. We are starting to set the roadmap for tourism and economic development. Most of the major infrastructure is being planned for the city. This is a great document. It shows that we are moving forward and we're on top of what we need to do to make this a thriving and certainly a city where hopefully people can get employment and enjoy their lives. So I certainly I would like to thank Mr Marmy and his team for this preparation of this document, and well done.
Thank you, Councillor Civic. Speakers against? Speakers for? Putting the recommendation, CEO2, could you please cast your vote? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to item 9, motions on notice. MN01, Councillor Baker, restricted recreational beach fishing near surf life-saving activities. Councillor Baker, do you have a seconder?
Oh, Senator, I beg your
Okay,
pardon.
thank you, Councillor Coetzee. Thank you. So, Councillor Baker.
Thanks very much, Madam Mayor. I'll try and be very brief once again. As many councillors are aware, at various beach locations, or at the start of the beach access pathway, there are often signs which say, in effect, no fishing, fishing not permitted. As we now know, of course, or as I now know as a result of doing a CRM, that so-called prohibition does not have any backing of a local law. Of course, at first blush, you'd think, well, hang on a minute, fishing, beach, you'd think that would be a matter solely within the jurisdiction of the state government under the Fisheries Act. But that is not the case, which is quite interesting indeed. But anyhow, the intention here is to, in effect, make beach areas safer, particularly where there can be interaction between beach fishermen or fishing persons, or fishing maids, whatever the current term is, I don't know, and members of the public. And this is particularly the case in terms of length of the beach, or length of the beach where the beach is patrolled by surf lifesavers. Not necessarily in between the flags, but the whole beach. And you'll see from the report that other councils have dealt with this issue in various ways. For example, Cottesloe, Mandurah and Bunbury and Busselton have gone quite far, actually, and they can actually ban, or they do purport to ban, with the backing of local laws, fishing in an area set aside as a designated bathing area. And of course, that bathing area may or may not necessarily be, if you like, patrolled by surf lifesavers, either during the surf lifesaving season, which is essentially summer, or outside this season, of course, which is essentially winter. So what I'm asking is for the city to agree to consult the community to gauge the level of interest or support for considering such restrictions, bearing in mind that some other 15 metro councils have done likewise and have introduced various types of laws prohibiting beach fishing. More interestingly, for example, Fremantle is in the process of prohibiting the fishing for sharks, and as I understand it, that is not just beach fishing for sharks, but within 200 metres of the beach. So that's basically the situation. I think we need to consult the community. There's a lot of anecdotal evidence out there from surf lifesavers and members of the public as to how the kids can get fish hooks in their fingers, hooks, bait, tackle, in effect washed up by the sand or even covered by sand at a patrol beach or even on either side of the flags. In other words, outside the patrol section, many patrolled areas are very narrow. Sometimes at the lagoon, the area or the distance can be as narrow as 25 to 40 to 50 metres, subject to what's happening with the tide and the wind and what have you, the surf. Yeah, and once again, I think that many people would believe that, well, hang on, fisheries matters, surely that's a state government issue. Surely the local government authority doesn't have any jurisdiction, but apparently it does, and I was surprised to learn that. So that's all I'm seeking. I seek your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Coetzee.
Thank you. I'm not going to say too much. It's just that I've received many complaints from residents, especially at the Yanchep Lagoon and at the Two Rocks Marina, where people swim and some people fish while they are swimming. So I think it's a little bit of a dangerous thing. I don't want to be hooked. I think it might be painful. Let's please send this out for community consultation, please.
Thank you, Councillor Coetzee. Speakers for? Councillor Civic.
Yeah, look, I'll speak for this with some caution because I know many fishermen, many recreational fishermen like their favourite spots. There is merit in this too, but I think it's quite touchy because a lot of the fishermen that especially at Yanchep, most of them fish south, but I take Councillor Coetzee's point that they might fish in the lagoon where there are people swimming, and I think that should be protected at all costs. But we've got to be very careful because, you know, when we look at our dog beaches, I mean, the dog beaches are taking over everything. So we've got to be very mindful that we do have recreational fishing in line with the surf clubs, yeah. If there's a problem there, and Councillor Baker makes the point of, you know, hooks in fingers and all that sort of stuff, and line on the beach, etc., etc. So whilst I sort of recommend this, and I think we get the community's feedback on this, I think there is some merit, but we've got to be mindful that people like to go fishing as well. So where they go and how we treat this, I look forward to the upcoming results. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Civic. Speakers against? Question, Councillor Treby.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, would be remiss of me not to ask this question, and I'm not concerned too much with the principle. It's just under the background, the first, was it 5 words, that says, and it's the basis for the entire motion, there is some community concern. And that appears to be a bit of an untested assumption. I'm just curious, is it a couple of people who are having a cup of coffee who raise concern, or is it an underlying group? If Councillor Baker has some capacity or ability to quantify that concern, because, and I ask it for one purpose, because it does ask administration to go and do some work, and I might add, this will be unbudgeted work, unfunded work, and given that we're currently in budget considerations, this is likely to add budget pressure. So I want to understand the scale and context of the issue. So if Councillor Baker has some further information, I'd be all ears.
Thank you, Councillor Treby.
Just to assist,
Councillor Baker.
Yes, just to assist, and rather than labouring sitting here for 3 or 4 hours, what I'd urge you to do, Councillor, is to contact the councils known as Joondalup, Kwinana, Rockingham, Stirling, Gin, and also Cottesloe, Mandurah, Bunbury, Busselton, etc., and Fremantle, more importantly Fremantle, and they will fill you in. Example anecdotal evidence of how these beach fishers, and depending on how you define the term beach, of course, how they interfere with what would normally be considered to be the usual day-to-day activities conducted on a beach. I'm sure the beaches in those 16 cities I've mentioned aren't sort of special beaches that are exceptions to the general rule. Beaches do attract beach fishers, but it's a matter of seeing where it's appropriate for them to fish and the manner in which they fish. And in a nutshell, we need to protect certainly all beach users, but those particularly young children, etc., who can be harmed by irresponsible beach fishermen or fishing persons, whatever the technical PC term is nowadays. I don't know. So, yeah, there's the answer. Just ring the councils and they'll probably tell you. And I can quote many examples of where kids have had, I mentioned hooks in the finger, hooks in the legs, goodness me, hit on the head with sinkers, being used by fishermen on large surf rods. There's a whole host of other hypothetical scenarios that have arisen in the past, and it's been raised as an issue. The point is this: The point is this: is it appropriate to have a sign saying no fishing permitted, whereas in reality there's no prohibition against fishing at that spot? It seems to be a very misleading sign. And once again, don't believe my view that there's a need for this community consultation. Think of the other 16 councils who've done exactly the same thing. I think it's important that we get up to speed, so to speak, with what's happening in the community and addressing these issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Treby, have a follow-up question?
Yes, I do, Madam Mayor, and with respect, I understand what Councillor Baker's saying. So I've heard hypotheticals, and I've heard go and have a chat to some other local councils. And I get that and I understand that, but of course we're talking about local context, and we're talking about costs that are going to be borne by the city's ratepayers. So I want to understand what is the local community concern, not other local governments. I'm asking this of Councillor Baker. What are the, where's the evidence of that concern? Because I just want to discern whether or not there's this underlying groundswell or whether or not it's localised, because that then gives us a chance to consider the scope. I don't mind the principle, but there's an untested assumption, and what I've heard so far is that it remains an untested assumption.
Thank you, Councillor Treby. I'm going to direct that Councillor Coetzee has already indicated happy to respond. Thank you, Councillor Coetzee.
Thank you. A follow-up on mine as well. I didn't think I had to give that much detail as well, but I do snorkel a lot at the Yanship Lagoon as well, and there is a lot of fishing hooks and lines at the bottom there. I think it was about 3 or 5 people that have stopped me on the way to my car. They told me that I think it was their kids or themselves were hooked by fishing lines. I have also seen especially young ones fishing there, and I know that the Lives of Saving Club actually approached them and asked them not to fish there, to move closer to the, or away from the rock area. And also at the Two Rocks Marina, I think it was last weekend when the Sun City Yacht Club had their wind-up, and there was also a person fishing there while we were busy there with the yachts, and there was also kids swimming in the water. So I don't know if that might answer something.
Madam Mayor, if I could just please
Thank you,
respond.
Councillor. Thank you, Councillor Coetzee. Councillor Baker, you
thank you very
wish
much.
to offer another response? Thank
yes,
you.
just to respond to that question as well, because I think it was directed at me initially. But the question is this, raised by the council. Where is the evidence of the level of concern that this is an issue in our local beaches? Where's the evidence of concern? Is there no concern? What about the fact the city pays for and installs no fishing signs along the beaches? The evidence comes from the city itself, the city's administration. There's the evidence. It's the evidence of your own council. Now, if you want those signs taken down, put up a motion, we'll take them down. And in any event, the actual recommendation is that we consult with the community to gauge the level of support, et cetera, for considering restrictions. We have signs which imply there are restrictions, but there ain't no restrictions. Those signs are fraudulent, they're false, deceptive and misleading. We don't have the laws to back up the signs, as opposed to the 16 other councillors who do. So the evidence is your own council with respect, Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor Baker. So, Councillor Treby.
Oh, yes, Madam Mayor, I think that was, with respect, I think that was a tad more aggressive than I was expecting in way of an answer, but that's okay. But the feedback from both councillor, I'm just trying to reduce the scope because the feedback seems localised. And this is about specifically, because I understand the other thing, the other response was about, actually the deeper we go into this, it does seem localised. Because the response was about signs banning fishing generally, as being the evidence. But of course now we're talking about recreational fishing in surf and surf life saving activities. So the comment was unrelated to the item, number one, and it does appear, and I don't doubt it, that there's going to be issues in Two Rocks and Yanship. I understand that circumstance. If the scope was where we identify those issues, and I absolutely take it that Councillor Coetzee has had those conversations, I absolutely accept that. And if it's localised to Two Rocks and Yanship, maybe that's where the consultation should be taken. I'm very mindful of the cost and the human resource impact given that we're coming up to budgets. And if it was localised in that Yanchep Two Rocks area, happy to support, because that appears to be where the evidence is coming from. But of course, the conversation about the signs being all over the place and we don't have legislation or we don't have local laws to underpin them is quite separate from what the issue is based in front of us.
Thank you,
Madam Mayor, point of order.
Thank you, Councillor Treby. Point of order.
In relation to the standing orders 3.14, motions of which previous notice has been given, a member may raise at a meeting any business that a member considers appropriate in the form of a motion, of which notice has been given in writing to the CEO. Obviously, this motion is relevant to whether it be local, whether it be to the city. I think it's appropriate, and I'm not sure why there's contention around the community consultation. At the end of the day, councillors raise any matters of importance to the community.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. And Councillor Treby was asking some questions in relation to that. Thank you. Speakers against? Speakers for? Councillor Sangali.
I'm happy to support going out to consultation, but I think we do need to make it very, very clear when we are in our consultation period whether we were talking about all recreational fishing or just particular types of recreational fishing. And the reason I ask that is one type of recreational fishing that takes place at Yanchep Lagoon is abalone fishing, which is already severely restricted. So I think we would get a lot of pushback from a lot of people if we were to turn around and say, okay, you can't abalone fish anymore in Yanchep Lagoon. Yeah, and the only reason I bring it up is because I noted it down, you said not just between the flags, but along the area where a surf club may be.
Councillor Baker, if you could just jot down and if you wish to respond when you have your right of reply.
Similarly, just on the other side of the lagoon, a lot of people do drop cray nets, cray pots. So again, you know, are we actually referring to them or are we only referring to a certain type of recreational fishing? So again, like I said, I'm happy to support going out for consultation, got absolutely no problem. But I think we need to be very, very clear in what it is that we're asking the community. Similarly enough, the other thing about surf lifesaving, and I 100% support having a free area, free of fishing, but we also have to acknowledge that surf club doesn't just occur from, you know, October through to March. They train over winter as well. And is that going to extend any fishing ban or anything like that? Will that extend through that period as well? Are we restricting that? So we need to look into that. The other thing is we also need to look at the effect that the extension of the Marmion Marine Park might have on fishing as well. Because if it does extend all the way to Two Rocks, one thing that gets taken out almost immediately is spearfishing. So that's already taken out. So we actually do need to look at this a lot more in depth. I don't think we can just go straight out to consultation. We actually need to do some deeper level research into what this will actually mean and the impact it's going to have on all types of recreational fishing. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Coetzee.
I just have a question. Will this be taken, can we take this to the forum first so that we can go through all of our questions first?
I think, Councillor Coetzee, a procedural motion could actually be raised that this be referred to forum. So, and Councillor Wright, you're happy to move the procedural motion, refer back to forum? For
Yep, certainly the concerns raised are valid as well.
Thank you. And do you have a seconder for the procedural motion? Thank you, Councillor Civic. Well, Councillor Coetzee seconded the original motion on notice, but we've got a procedural motion to refer back to the, to refer back to forum. Can we please cast our vote?
The right citizen, is that what you call it?
So it was moved Councillor Wright and seconded Councillor Civic. And that's carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to MN02, we have Councillor Miles. You have a motion on notice and the seconder, Councillor Miles.
Councillor Huntley was going to second that.
Councillor Huntley, right, thank you. Councillor Miles If you'd like to speak to your procedural, to your motion on notice, thank you.
Look, thank you, Mayor and councillors. This one is actually to request administration do an assessment and bring it to a forum in September. And this has come to light because of in the ward that myself and Councillor Huntley and also the Central Ward councillors Civic and Wright, with all the new growth and new roads that are going to go in over the back, community expectation has changed considerably with respect to noise and the impact of road noise going past or near their properties. This was an issue recently on Romeo Road up in Carabooda, where the new road works for the freeway extension to there was going on, and there was an issue about building a noise wall. Council's policy has been not to have noise walls, and therefore main roads were at a bit of a crossroad with regard to that. Now, the director, Harminder Singh, was very happy to get involved, and there's been an outcome there that has helped those particular residents. But we shouldn't have to do that every time that there is a need for possible road noise walls. Main roads themselves have a policy that they adhere to, and they build walls all over the place, as we've seen with some of the infrastructure they've built recently. There is another issue that is going to come up for us here in this council nearly very soon, and that is obviously when Flynn Drive gets to be made into a four-lane highway. That is literally going to be within 50 or 60 metres of houses. And as we know in the appropriate information that we've received from our economic development team, Flynn Drive could have anything up to 40 or 50,000 cars a day travelling on it when it's at its full potential. And to put in noise walls and the like after the developers have moved on or other people have built infrastructure starts to add a considerable cost to ratepayers. So what I'm asking council to approve is that administration come up with an assessment, a discussion paper, bring it back to a forum at the end of September. This also will align with the future East Wanneroo. As we know, there's a lot of new roads being planned to go through there, and I'd like us to have a more up-to-date policy with regard to noise attenuation infrastructure. Trees grow up and all of a sudden you lose your noise attenuation because all you've got is the actual trunk of a tree. So there needs to be some other methods putting in place. It can be sound, it could be sand walls, it doesn't have to be concrete, but that'll be up for administration to bring to us. So I'm open to any noise mitigation, but I'd like us to obviously look at seeing this later in the year. So Council, I ask for your support with this notice of motion.
Thank you, Councillor Miles. Councillor Huntley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I looked at administration's comments this morning and thought, that's okay, until I live at the back of Franklin and Lenore Road, and on Franklin Road this morning, a particular vehicle, large vehicle, was just sitting there idling, and the noise coming through from the road, so that's through two lots of streets, it was vibrating the ground underneath our house. It was amazing how much noise there was, and that road is getting busier and busier, and it's sort of, it probably wouldn't qualify for main roads to put a noise wall in there, but I think this is something that we're going to need to look at as we put these large roads in and we do get more and more traffic on them. We're going to have 150,000 people in East Wanneroo. We're going to need to look into either noise diversion or abatement type of infrastructure on the sides of these roads. Noise walls frightens me because I always think of a great big concrete structure straight at the back of your home. But there are other things that other countries have done, and I do think this needs to come really to us, and perhaps we should have a discussion on how we are going to deal with the noise, especially when we have very close, tight little networks of small areas of residential houses, and also our parks are getting smaller and smaller. So it really does affect, it's going to affect the livelihood, and it does affect the fact that you cannot get away from the traffic noise. So I think I'm happy to second this for Councillor Miles. I think it's something that we probably do need to look into.
Thank you, Councillor Huntley. Speakers for? Councillor Civic first.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, I'm certainly in favour of supporting Councillor Miles on this. I mean, in the future, cars may be much, much quieter in terms of being electric, etc., but nevertheless, there'll be a lot of them. But there's nothing worse than seeing these concrete walls when you drive down Wanneroo Road and you see, you know, the brickwork alongside. It's abhorrent. It doesn't look good. But I certainly believe that we should be looking at our planning principles, and if these walls are required, then there's no choice. If the noise levels are there, I'm happy to bring this back to a forum or have administration look into it. But we certainly need to plan for this in the future. So I'm happy to support it. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Civic. Speakers against? Speakers for? Councillor Treby.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, I'm absolutely happy to support Councillor Miles on this matter. I'll just raise one point, is that we ought to be careful with the style and form as this progresses, because there was a circumstance where sand buns were used along Hepburn Avenue at the back of Balladura, and the cure was worse than the disease, because the complaints that were received about overlooking, there were people who would go and stand on top of the sand buns at the rear of the property and look straight into the backyard, which is why they've now been taken down, and there's big limestone walls right the way down there now. So sand buns weren't effective, or they were effective with sound. They were also very effective to assist, let's say, antisocial behaviour. So just we've got to look at the alternatives, and I think it's well worth time, given the level of growth. I don't think it's going to concern Councillor Rowe or I down in the South Ward, but certainly in respect of those growth areas, well worthwhile having a look at.
Thank you, Councillor Treby. Speakers against? Speakers for? Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Mayor. Certainly happy to support Councillor Miles' motion on notice, and obviously it's very proactive in building sustainable communities, and also helps with that community safety aspect of it as well. And I know for Councillor Svitten and I is obviously East Wanneroo, and obviously if we can get this sort of nailed in terms of planning policy, at least when we start having applications come through, Council has made their mind up in what we want East Wanneroo, the requirements for developers, and obviously the main roads come. So I can see that being a big issue, and also for other growth areas like Yanship. So certainly supportive of the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Speakers against? Councillor Rowe, and then I think Councillor Sangali. Pardon? Yes, in support. Thank you.
Just wanted to clarify that. Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I'm also speaking in support of this motion on notice. I think generally some of the feedback I've received from particularly North Alexander Heights residents who are directly adjacent to Hepburn Ave, and I know of, even though it's not my ward, people alongside Lenore Road. I believe that'd be Pearsall and Hocking in the Central Ward. And I don't necessarily know if this is to deal with it retrospectively, but in terms as a growth council, looking at building roads, infrastructure and developing out in East Wanneroo, I do think we certainly have an obligation to look into it and to make sure that all options are considered, and I think this is an appropriate course of action. So well done, Councillor Miles.
Thank you, Councillor Rowe. Speakers against? Speakers for? Councillor Sangali.
Thank you. I think Councillor Miles made a very valid point before about the negotiations that the city have had previously with main roads, and I think that in itself is a really good reason just to have something that we have a discussion about. The other thing is also, I note one of the very last things that's mentioned in here is the actual state planning policy, which talks about road and rail transport. And I would like to make sure that when we do have this discussion, that we are also including that the fact that we do have a very long rail system running through the North Coast corridor. And, you know, as we will remember before, there was a previous government who happened to leave some vibration matting out that made for a very noisy existence for the surrounding residents. So it would be really good that we actually have something in place that acknowledges that we know about this sound and we'll do something about it if we need to.
Thank you. Speakers against? Speakers for? Okay, Councillor Miles, you don't need a right of reply because everybody's agreed with you, but we'll cast this vote. Can you please cast your vote? Thank you. That's carried unanimously. Thank you, Councillor Miles, and thank you, Councillor Huntley, for bringing that motion on notice to Council. Moving on to item 10, urgent business, we have none. Item 11, confidential, we have none. Item 12, date of the next meeting. The next council members briefing session has been scheduled for 6 p.m. on the 3rd of May 2022 to be held in Council Chambers, Civic Centre 23, Dundebar Road, Wanneroo. And I declare the council meeting closed at 9:43 p.m. Thank you.